What is the most difficult part of learning the guitar?
I think that the patience part of it. I don't think it's really hard to learn, but having the patience for certain things, knowing that even if I practice this for an hour today, I'm not going to have it by tomorrow. Understanding that certain things are like a slow burn. It'll be over time.
I think it depends what stage you're at, but initially it's physical, and then I think it's probably maintaining positive forward motion. So being able to keep yourself motivated, I think, is probably the hardest thing, because it's a difficult thing to do.
Honestly, I would say just kind of getting out of your own way, not beating yourself up too much in the beginning, and just in general the process of developing your ear.
Putting in the time, realizing that it's absolutely just about doing the work. There's no magic. Now, some people have some extra fairy dust, they just do, but 99% of it is just doing the work. That's it. And I struggle with it all the time. You play with somebody and they've got some stuff together and you're like, yeah, I just got to practice more, period. That's it. Like anybody who's good at anything, as the old expression goes, if it were simple, everyone could do it.
I get interested in so many different things all at once. So the hard part for me is to concentrate on just one thing at a time, because it's very common for me to be like into gypsy jazz at the same time I'm into like neoclassical shredding and stuff, and you have to be in two different headspaces really to delve deep into something, to a particular style or technique, so to speak. That's the hardest part for me.
I would say getting over like the initial phase of not being able to play anything that you're hearing in your head. That might be the hardest part, because it's not, you're going to have to just like be working towards this goal, and that period might not be super inspiring.
Chords, because with my background, I started playing violin at such a young age that the single note stuff really translated. But even when I was first kind of presented with the idea of open chords, it's like, wait, I have to memorize all these different shapes. All of these are a different name. And then I think also with myself and with students, it's like bar chords were baffling. And it was really kind of learning about caged and how it all fits together there that started to put the pieces together. But for me, it was chords, without a doubt.
The fact that there's an average of 9.2 different fingerings for every note on the guitar.
The most difficult part about learning the guitar is not getting caught up in the idea of traps of shapes. So guitar wasn't my first instrument, mandolin was. So when I came over, I was trying to apply things that I could play into the guitar, and I wasn't looking at shapes. And then I discovered that there were all these ideas of cage systems, this, that, and the other. And what it ends up happening is that you end up having hot and cold spots throughout the neck of the guitar. And ideally, you want to be thinking intervallically to where no matter what instrument you're playing, the instrument is just a vehicle, right? So if you understand intervals, you can go pick up a banjo and pluck something out, or whatever, walk over to a keyboard and poke out a melody, right? You're understanding chord tones in the bigger picture and not being like, well, this is the shape that, the tab says. I think that's the hardest thing, is getting over that wall.
For me, probably technique. I feel like that's harder than... Actually, for me, technique was harder. Now I'll say it from a teacher's standpoint, the hardest thing to teach other people, I feel like, is rhythm. I don't think memorizing the notes on the fretboard is that hard, but people usually get that it's too boring for a lot of people and they don't want to do it. But if they actually did it, it wouldn't take that long, and it's not that hard.
Like from a beginner standpoint, building callus and like muscle fatigue on my fingers and getting, all the bar chords to sound clearly and stuff like that. I feel like once I nailed that, it was a lot easier. Definitely another one of the most difficult things that I still struggle with today is that my fingers don't always do what my brain wants them to do. Like I see dudes playing so incredibly fast, and I try to do it. I'm just like, yeah, my hands just don't work that way. So accepting like your limitations, but still working towards exceeding them.
Time, feel, playing in time. It's something that I think it's a skill. It's a muscle that you develop, and like a muscle, I think it can atrophy if you don't, specifically in terms of playing with people, playing in a group setting. I think time feel is the most difficult, and I think it's easier for some people, harder for others, but I think anyone just about can develop good time feel, which arguably I think is the most important part of playing any instrument.
During your guitar journey, how did you best break through plateaus or slumps that you might have run into?
For me, it was always transcribing. I just felt like if I sit here and I keep doing scales, I get better at those things, but those are facilitating the plateau because I'm just good at the scales. I'm not better at phrasing, any of that stuff. So probably upon the time, like I started meeting you guys, it was like, I need to take that more seriously. Just learning from the greats and then trying to find me in there. And I felt like that always, even if I didn't enjoy, like I'm not a huge jazz fanatic, but I need to be able to do it. But I always felt like if I studied something that maybe I don't like on the surface, I let it show me something. I let it teach me something. And I always got better from it.
I always found that I could never force myself through plateaus. I had to find a way of becoming obsessed with the thing that I was trying to do. Now, there's no specific way of being able to do this. You just have to experiment a little bit. But I've found whenever I've got through a plateau or whenever I've become good at something, it's not because I found some trick or snake oily way of getting through it. I had to essentially just become obsessed and work at that thing consistently. That's what worked for me. Not having a specific practice regime or like my time detailed out in a very specific way, just becoming obsessed and working and working and working on that thing because it was the only thing I could think about, basically. So if you can find the way to become obsessed with that particular element of guitar playing or music or whatever you're doing, you're almost guaranteed to be able to push through to that next plateau.
Well, a lot of my learning has just been from, honestly, just transcribing my favorite players' solos and things like that. So I'd say the ways that I typically break through a plateau is just like find something new, find something different to learn that's just completely not what I've been doing. Just try and find something that's totally out of left field. Like if I've been working on blues stuff for a while, work on some jazz or some bluegrass or just whatever. Work on different stuff.
Persevere, but also just go to other people, go to gigs, get together with friends, take a lesson with someone who does something you want to be able to do. Sometimes I recommend it, but not too much, is like, copying somebody else. I got really into, say, Jeff Beck, and then realized I was getting too into Jeff Beck to sound like a poor imitation of the unimitatable. You know what I mean? Like, so then, but to kind of you try to get into somebody else's head, and that introduces you to different ideas. And then after you start working on it, if you're conscientious about not sounding like someone else, because after a while, I'm sure you're saying, like, you've learned a lick from whoever, and then it's yours now, and it doesn't sound like the way you stole it from whoever. So I think if you're conscious of that. But for me, it was always like putting on a record, digging into somebody really heavily who is a little bit outside of what you do, and then running with that.
I just stopped playing guitar. Like I won't touch a guitar for 3 or 4 days, a week maybe. And every time I come back to it, there's no more slump. I'm fresh. Something else I do a lot of, and I don't know if there's a science to it, but I like to play at night before bed and just pick up a guitar and just create, because for some reason I'm like the most creative at that time. I'm sure there's science to it, but I'll always come up with the coolest riffs. I mean, the coolest to me. Like that's when I'm making something that's worth something to me. Like I'll come up with chord progressions or find out new licks to play or lines. So yeah, I feel the freshest at night.
I had a couple really good teachers when I was pretty young, so that certainly helped a lot. I had a teacher named Chris Bono. That was like a major help. That he kind of like taught me how to be like a professional musician. Before that, I didn't have any idea what that meant. I didn't realize there was like tons of working musicians who maybe not even be famous. And playing with people, I think, was the other thing that really helped a lot. I had a few friends that played when I was really young, playing just like rock and stuff. And then after that, had a little jazz group. And it was not good, but it was like perfect for me at the time.
Look for some new inspiration. So if you're listening to a bunch of blues, go listen to jazz, go listen to rock, go listen to funk, whatever it is, something different. I think that can be really effective. I think one of the things that always inspires me is playing with other musicians. So if you have that opportunity to go and play with some people, it's always going to make you think in a bit different way than if you're sitting at home just practicing. And the third thing that sometimes is the key, go do something else. Step away from it a bit, come back with a fresh set of ears, a fresh perspective, and that can really just put you in a different mindset.
By setting myself a goal, like a medium-term goal, like I need to transcribe this piece, or I need to write this lesson, or write this book. So, and I just sort of set myself these goals that forced me to have an end in mind. So I feel like that gets me onto the next plateau.
That's a tricky question to answer because the solution every single time is to find a solution that's never been found before. So whatever the solution was the last time you were in a slump isn't going to be the solution this time. That's the whole point, is that a slump means you're bored and you need to find something new. So there's no set answer to that, except the one thing I've just told myself that keeps me from freaking out when I feel like I'm in a slump is that a slump is actually a good thing because it means you're tired of the stuff that you've been playing all the time and you are now house cleaning and making room for new stuff. So it actually kind of I always feel like if I feel like I'm in a slump, it actually means like a renaissance is around the corner or something. Like I'm about to find something new if I just keep going a little longer.
I feel like I still have so many plateaus, but honestly, what I love doing was just getting inspired by other guitar players. I'd like, look, not really any guitar players in specific, but just like hearing other soloists, hearing other people, and kind of learning what they're doing and taking little bits and pieces of that and applying it to what I do. Like not trying to copy someone exactly, but drawing inspiration from other guitar players that I'm just like, God, I want to be able to sound that good.
Two ways. One would have been when I was touring full time. We would get ready for a new run, put a new set list together, and have to rehearse and shed a bunch of new music and really get that together. That was one really effective way of breaking through a plateau. But the way I do it now is just by putting my guitar down for a few days and listening to new stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with not playing your guitar for a week. Like, don't feel guilty. If you're in a plateau and you're feeling burnout or uninspired, like put your guitar down and don't touch it for a few days and go listen to something new, or don't listen to music or whatever, but take some time away. And then when you come back, you'll be more refreshed and have some new ideas. And it's almost like your brain sort of dumps a lot of those repetitive ideas that you just play over and over again. It just sort of like resets.
Do you feel like there are any kind of like passive behaviors that contribute to guitar development, such as listening to different kinds of music or even like learning another instrument?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my best talent, if I have one, something that came a little naturally to me, was my ear. So just absorbing so much music as a young kid and really going through like the history of rock and roll and everything. So like I'm very steeped in like where it began, even though I play it and I come across more like Van Halen or something. Like I very much know like Chuck Berry and things like that, like extremely well. So I felt like growing up always hearing it, I kind of got to go through the cycle with it. And so when I hear things, I just kind of know what they are already. It's weird. I didn't have to like do ear training as hard, maybe on like intervals, but not so much on chord changes and stuff.
100%, without a shadow of a doubt. There are lots of passive things that are useful when you're trying to learn any instrument. I would absolutely recommend that you go and see as much and listen to as much live music as possible to see the thing, especially these days where a lot of this stuff is online. Go and listen to real musicians, go and talk to real musicians, go and see what the actual thing that you want to do, how it is in real life and how live music sounds and how musicians interact. Especially improvised music, if you're interested in doing that. I think that's really important to see how people interact with other musicians and what the role of the guitar is in a real world sense, where you can see that and hear it happening in front of you, and you'll be very inspired by seeing live musicians. Go and see as many gigs, jam sessions, whatever that you can. And also on an active level, go and play with lots of musicians as well, not just passively, but I think you can do that activity passively as well.
Absolutely yes to both of those. I think just listening to, I don't want to sound like a snob, but just like, music that is just good, I guess. Listening to good, like real music, like stuff that's not too lightweight, fluff kind of stuff, I think is really important because, the more you listen to stuff that's legit, it'll just kind of make its way into your own playing. And I mean, learning other instruments for sure. I think learning piano is huge, just especially if you're learning theory. I think it makes it a lot easier to conceptualize the stuff, and then you can apply it to guitar later. And just learning like bass, and just kind of, even if you can't play drums, just kind of learning about what the rhythm section is doing, I think can help with your pocket and your feel and just your rhythm and just things like that.
I'm always envious of the people who are actually good at multiple instruments, like really good. I wish it certainly can only inform what you do, but I never went that route. But yeah, listening, like conscientious listening to stuff away from the instrument. Or I know this isn't necessarily passive, but one important thing that I think really made a difference for me, and I tell everybody, and anybody I know who's a player has done this, you never not have the guitar in your hand. Like, you're watching TV, it's in your hand. You're surfing the internet, it's in your hand. Like, so I think there's like a connection you make, like a mind-body connection of just where stuff is. And then also if you're watching TV, just try to match something like, what was that chord? What chord is that? And try to figure it out. And sometimes I hear a chord and I'm like, oh, I'm right. Like, got the right pitch, got the right chord, so that's not necessarily passive, but it's not active ear training, if you know what I mean.
Both. Before I played guitar, I learned piano, and then I switched to drums. So I had a background of basic kind of harmony and rhythm and everything before I switched to guitar. And a lot of my favorite guitar players are also drummers. But I think there's something about, especially drums, just having that rhythmic background and being able to hear syncopation and different rhythms that you can translate to any harmonic instrument, whether it's guitar or saxophone or whatever. And one minute I'll be listening to like 90s hip hop, next minute I'll be listening to Django Reinhardt, and then, I'm all over the place when it comes to music that I listen to on a daily basis. So I think a lot of that has to do with what influences my playing and writing and production, whatever.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I've spent periods of time doing more listening than anything else. And that can really inform so much, especially styles that don't have guitar. Like I listened to tons of jazz that didn't have guitar at all. And then I got really into 20th century classical music for a while. And then coming back to the guitar, trying to get into some of those sounds was interesting, fun, challenging.
I was always the kid in school that would get in trouble for like humming in class and for like tapping rhythms out. So I think having that just musical awareness and that overall curiosity definitely contributes and helps. I think also something that we probably both see a decent amount of is students who are like, if I can get to this point, I'll be content. And it's focusing more on the destination than it is on the journey, where the thing that I've really learned over the years is the enjoyment is the journey. And it's if you don't enjoy the process and really think of it as a lifelong thing, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because I've long ago come to terms, I will never know everything there is to know about this thing. No one out there does, even the best out there. But it's about enjoying the process and really just having that mentality towards it.
So listening to music obviously helps learning guitar, but I almost think if you're listening to music passively, you're not getting as much out of it as you could. I mean, I guess it helps your feel, but active listening is better, like with your instrument in there, where you're actively trying to like figure stuff out and put it in your brain and your fingers, Passively, maybe a little, I guess. I think that would help your time feel. But like when I started out as a kid, I played the cello, so it helped develop my fingers. It helped translate to the guitar nicely, I think.
I think my perspective is interesting just because my background's mandolin, being formative years of learning technique and delivery on a stringed instrument. My favorite musicians weren't guitar players as through my teens. I didn't hear Van Halen or Eric Johnson or Steve Morse or any of that stuff till I was 19 years old. And so by then my musical tastes were so broad, and I've been hugely inspired my whole life by soundtracks, whether that be to film or video games or as simple as Christmas tunes, just things that aren't like guitar stuff. And that helps the ear be more aware, other than just driving with your hands first. Lets the ear drive first. Good melody writing and stuff like that, I think, all comes from those other places.
Yeah, I feel like literally everything. Conversations with other people, being a good friend to your friends, literally anything I feel like can contribute to your musical development. Maybe not like on a technical level on the guitar. I feel like all that stuff might come after you put in your due diligence of like learning the notes on the fretboard and learning scales. And once you have all this information and you're trying to figure out what's the most meaningful thing you can say with it, then all that stuff in the outside world, when you're not even holding a guitar, becomes really important and influences you. Anytime I just see people demonstrate like empathy and patience for one another, I feel like subconsciously, without me even being aware of it, that contributes to my ability to be a group improviser and a better listener, and more focused on making the band sound better rather than thinking about how good I sound.
Definitely. I didn't spend too much time learning other instruments. I really just play guitar. But I mean, for me, it was definitely like listening to every genre imaginable. Like when I was growing up, I would listen to old school classical music on with like in the same day I'd be listening to death metal, and then I'd be listening to Sade, and I'd be listening to P-Funk, and I would really try to like authentically find like that feeling and that fundamental of that style of music. Like I get just as much joy playing along to like Bootsy and Catfish Collins, like just the same repetitive funk and feeling it good for like minutes and minutes and not really changing anything. Like that to me is just as exciting as like playing some Pantera or old school metal stuff or like really shreddy stuff. Like I really enjoyed trying to authentically sound like each genre that I would attempt to play. And I feel like that really made me a very versatile musician.
Yes, learning another instrument for sure. Bass. I think bass, every guitar player, if you're a serious guitar player, you should also play bass. And I think you should strive to not sound like a guitar player playing bass. And what that means is that you are being intentional about thinking as part of the rhythm section. So you're listening to the drums intently, like you're listening to the hi-hat pattern, you're listening to the kick pattern, you're listening to the interaction between those. When I started playing bass, it almost overnight made me a better guitar player because it forced me to start listening to what the drummer was doing, not just in the tempo or in the groove, but actually like, hey, what's the hi-hat pattern? What is he doing with the hi-hat? Or what is the kick pattern here? How is it changing from the verse to the chorus? Like bass.
Do you have any pre-practice or performance rituals that really get you in your zone?
Yeah, to me, I try to play things that I would play. So licks, or I kind of sit there in my head, kind of keep a groove or a chord progression in mind, and I just try to play. And I like to hear myself. I don't like to play acoustically. So like anytime you're like on the side of the stage, that tends to be warming up because I can't hear it anyways. So I'm just trying to get my fingers to move together. But I always play slow too. Really let my hands get synced up. If it's my solo guitar one, I just show up 45 minutes early and start to play tunes and just like get my, because that's just a different thing to me than, like a fusion gig or something.
All I need before a show, this is just cliched, but I just need my hands to be relatively warm. If you're struggling to get warm, I will often go to the bathroom and fill a basin up with hot water and just leave my hands in there for a while. And also the tops of my wrists, I will leave those in the basin just to get my hands warm. Because what I have found in the past is if I've tried to warm up too aggressively because I'm worried my hands aren't warm, I often find I get aches and pains through my hand, almost through stress because I feel my hands are not where they need to be. Whereas this whole thing of dunking your hands in quite hot water is a very passive thing, back to being passive, a very passive thing that just warms through the hands, and you're not going to run into that kind of stressing the hands out. What I would mention is there is a danger to warming up on the guitar too much in that if things are not going the way you want them to, it can really stress you out and put you in a bad place before the gig mentally or before the show. So I'd recommend you warm up a little bit, but also try this thing of putting your hands in warm water and relax.
I do not. I mean, I'll just noodle for a second, just play a few slide licks, and yeah, I don't really have a ritual or anything like that.
I'm trying to meditate more. I kind of got into it with TM not that long ago through a friend of mine, which has been great. It's like exercising. You're into it for a while, you start feeling better, and you stop doing it. So I'm that kind of way with the TM stuff. I think before gigs, I just try to warm up a bit. It depends on what you're playing. Oftentimes it's not doable, if it depends what kind of, if it's a bar or if they don't really have a backstage or there's a band before you or whatever and you're setting up. So I try to practice at home. But the main thing I do is I just know the material. Like if I feel like if I know the tunes really, really well, whether they're my own, I still run over them, then I at least have got that covered. So I don't have to worry about thinking about like, shit, where's it go now? Or you're looking around. Because that's the worst. And I've been in that situation like, yeah, I know it. And you get on stage like, I don't know it.
It really, well, I guess it depends on the gig that I'm doing. Sometimes it involves like a shot of tequila. No, that's only on the country gigs. But as far as like if I was doing a gig where there was like some technical stuff, so for instance, like when I did some kind of hard rock metal gigs, I did have to intentionally warm up before the show because that was the type of gig that I really needed my fingers to be able to move. Because I think the first night I probably didn't warm up and I got to certain parts. I'm like, oh my God, my wrists are stiffening up and everything. So it really depends on the material that you're playing. But in general, I mean, there's been times where I don't even touch a guitar until I hit the stage, for some certain gigs and stuff. So I probably don't warm up as much as I should before shows unless it's something that's technical.
Sometimes I do a lot of meditation actually. So sometimes I might even like meditate in the morning and then play right after that. Trying to not have any thought necessarily and just like trying to connect to the instrument in a very pure way. That can kind of really set the tone. I might even just play for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes just free improvising, sometimes playing over a tune, but trying to have it be very intuitive and not intellectual.
Definitely no to the pre-practice. I've never been good about being a super structured practicer. I'm very much something catches my ear, I want to transcribe it or learn it, and I dive down that rabbit hole. In terms of pre-performance, I always kind of, sound check is weird for me because I used to try to play well in sound check, and I don't try to do that at all anymore. I try to get a sense for the room. So if you hear me in sound check, I'm going to play as loud as I ever would that night. Get a sense of how is the sound reflecting off the back walls? How does the room sound? I'm also going to play as quiet as I possibly would that night. Get a sense of how that sits in the room. I'm using it more to get comfortable with what the room sounds like than how I'm playing on that day. I'll always take a guitar backstage and noodle a bit within 30 minutes of going on, and I am usually the one having a glass of red wine or a glass of whiskey. Only one, just to kind of get out of my own head. Not so much that I'm forgetting lyrics, but enough so that when I'm going to improvise, I'm not thinking. I'm playing very intuitively and trusting everything that's there.
Nope. I used to, but I just play. I think there are certain technique things that I'll do like after a vacation to get my fingers, going again. Here's my favorite one. It goes like this. 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, 4, 2, 4. So it's an 8-note pattern, and it works out the weakest finger, the pinky, the most. But if you feel it, it's an 8-note pattern, but you feel it as triplets. It really messes with your brain. And then you can double up on each one. Anyway, it's like there's more stuff that you can do with it.
Yeah, man. Usually, if I get a good half an hour with a video game, in all seriousness, though, it's knowing that practice isn't learning. Like when I say I practice at speed, that doesn't mean that I just can assimilate a Chick Corea tune and just start playing it at speed. That's not what I'm saying. Learning something is slow. And I think that's a big misconception when it comes to pre-practice, practice, all this stuff. It's like learning is acquiring the knowledge to navigate the piece of music. Practice is actually putting it at the tempo that it needs to be played at, because you have to understand what that feels like. If you're practicing 40 BPM slower than, Spain is, or, Mediterranean Sundance, it's like you're never going to be able to play it at speed because you're only ever playing it 40 BPM lower than it needs to be. Like you need to play it at speed and buff it out at speed, right? So practice, pre-practice, learning, those are all wadded up together for me.
A lot of them. As far as just holding the guitar, I have like metronome exercises that I do. I used to set my metronome at 40, and that would be my half note. And then I would play quarter notes, so double what the metronome was. And that would be quarter notes on the guitar, and then I would subdivide with my mouth from quarter note triplets, eighth note triplets, 16th notes, 16th note triplets, you know what I mean? And go back and forth between any combination of those two rhythms, and just take the time to get synced up. Then I would flip it and do the opposite. I would just do quarter notes with my mouth and do those same subdivisions, but on the guitar, just playing like through the G major scale or something. And then beyond that, I stretch. I have these, because I have tendonitis, so I always do stretches before I play. And I try to do like some meditation before a gig, like 15 minutes of it, or I'll take a nap or something if there's a good place to do that.
Yeah, lately, like for the past year, like going on tour and just being on like flyouts, flying to England or France to do like a one-off for 25 minutes, you spend a lot of time doing nothing. And like I'm the kind of person that gets like really restless energy, and I get like anxious energy if I'm just not doing anything for the whole day and then I go on stage. And I noticed that bringing that restless energy on stage gives me anxiety. Like I start getting in my head about everything that I'm like, why am I getting like this? I'm normally not like this. So lately my thing is like I find like a flight of stairs and I just run up and down them like 10 times to the point of exhaustion right before I go on stage, and my adrenaline just kind of kicks in. And then I just walk on stage feeling incredible. Like I'm so clear headed. I feel like I nail the performance and everything. So anything just to get my blood flowing right before I go on stage gives me an incredible performance every time.
So I don't really practice. I don't have that routine or discipline thing. I've talked about it on my channel before, but I'm highly ADHD, and part of the way that that manifests in my life is that I struggle with like a routine. So practicing just doesn't work for me. But for a gig, yes. Especially as I've gotten older, I find that I have to warm up. I have to be more intentional. I just had a gig here in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and I sat like 20 minutes before we went on stage. I just sat backstage and was doing some warm-up exercises, some strumming, some like playing stuff just to get my hands sort of awake and loose. And it helps to kind of calm any nerves that you might be feeling, you know. So yeah, there's a few like practice exercises that I have that are just sort of mindless, like turn your brain off and get your hands warm.
Did you ever have any prolonged period where you actually weren't able to, or you didn't play guitar, like you took a break or anything like that?
Man, not really since I've begun. When my grandmother had passed, I tried to, but there was still like contractual things on the books that I couldn't get out of. So like I had taken a break from any club dates. I really tried to give myself a break, but then teaching an entire clientele of people too, you can't really escape it. Which
totally
I think was a bad thing in that moment. I would have really liked to have gotten away from it. But since I began playing, I mean, I've always had a healthy balance of, playing guitar for fun and then also playing guitar for a living. But I haven't taken any real true breaks from it.
The last year and a half, I've hardly played guitar outside of work, going and doing clinics, masterclasses, playing in various places. At home, when I'm on my own, for the first time in my life, I've hardly picked up the guitar and hardly practiced. What I've been telling myself is I'll get to the point where it just naturally comes back, and if I force it, that's probably going to be more of a problem because it's going to push me away from it even more. And you do just go through natural arcs, like a sine wave of how much you want to play the guitar. I'm 43 now, and I'm no longer 16 playing 8 hours a day, and my progress is like this. My progress is very much plateau, little bit of development, plateau, and that little bit of development requires a lot of input work-wise. So when I don't want to play, I don't play unless I have to maintain, which is basically what I have been doing for if I have to do a show or a clinic or whatever, I have to have that minimum level of ability in order to be able to do the show. Usually for me it's left-hand minimum ability.
Not really. I started when I was 9 years old, and aside from a couple like family vacations where I couldn't bring a guitar with me, I've pretty much ever since then just consistently been playing.
Not prolonged, but I do have some hand issues, from repetitive stress. So it's never been more than a few weeks, that I still kind of play it. There's never been a time, fortunately, where I could not play at all. But there were times where I had to back way, way off, and it's never good. Like emotionally for me, it's bad. Especially because when you see like your calluses sort of going a bit, and I find like I'll just play guitar for a couple minutes, just something to kind of reset my emotional state. So when I can't play it, that kind of flips me out. I think it's good to take a few days away. If you go on vacation or you go somewhere like, sometimes I don't. I almost always bring a guitar because I regret when I don't, but sometimes I don't play it. Yeah, but that's a kind of a cool, fresh feeling when you pick it up again. You're like, oh, kind of new.
Yeah, I would say the longest period that I ever went without playing guitar was unfortunately when my mom passed away in 2012. I was actually away from my home. I was in Florida visiting with my dad and taking care of my dad. So I didn't have a guitar with me. So it was kind of on purpose that I didn't touch a guitar for about almost 2 months. And then I remember specifically we were in like Daytona Beach, and my wife, me and my dad just went to like a local mom and pop music store. Cause I'm like, you know what? I just want to buy like a cheap Telecaster or something just so I can have something to noodle around. And it felt like, I remember specifically what it felt like to touch a guitar after all that time. And sometimes it's a good thing to like get away from a guitar for a little bit.
I did actually. I got tendonitis when I was about 24 or so. Dealing with that was challenging, and I think I didn't play guitar for like 6 months. It was really weird when I started playing it. It was like, just felt horrible. No chops at all. I mean, it's just completely like gone with the bay.
I don't think I ever had one where I didn't play at all. I did not play a whole lot aside from when I was teaching or doing something professional in like mid to late 2020 into 2021. To me, like so much of what I live for and what I want is to be playing live. Like that's the outlet more than sessions than anything else. And when that was off the table, because I did 2 live streams with basically no audience in, I think, August 2020 and like maybe October. But aside from that, I didn't play a gig in front of people till the next June. And it was a very uninspiring time because it's just like you're home all the time. You're not getting that lived experience that I think often translates to the writing. But also it's like, am I going to play a gig again? You know, I think all of us had that thought for a bit of when is that coming back? Is it coming back? Are people going to go out? And then it really, that spark got relit as soon as it's like, oh, we're back. Okay, cool.
I have not had an injury, thank God, but yeah, vacations, you know, sometimes I'll go 2 weeks, you know. I think the longest vacation, I did one last summer, it was 3 weeks. I went without playing guitar. Yeah, it's a little sluggish, you know, but, you know, and your calluses are less, you know, less thick. But yeah, it's fine. You just get back to it and you play. And
when I started playing electric guitar, nah, man, the longest period I'd go would be maybe a week. But even within that week, still meander over to something laying in the living room. I've got a really cheap little PRS acoustic. I mean, that thing's like $500, you know, but I play it all the time just because it's always laying on the couch. It's like one of my most played guitars, you know? So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe a week, maybe.
In the grand scheme of things, no. The only time that really happened was there's been a couple times where that was forced because of tendonitis, where if it got bad enough, I had to stop playing for like a month or something. And that was really hard. Like I really, but because it's hard, it was probably good for me to let go of guitar. I'm sure it's good for me, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. But I feel like I tend to get more, I don't feel good about this, but I feel like I get a little more like easily agitated or when I don't get to play guitar. I mean, it really is like it's medicine. So it'd be hard for me to put it down for a prolonged period of time.
No, I fortunately and unfortunately kind of work year round. I did get injured last year while on tour, and I had something called Deeker veins tenosynovitis, and it's just this crazy inflammation kind of in this area, which wouldn't affect my playing too much, but affected my everyday life, and I usually had to tape up my hand while I was playing. And man, luckily, just some serious life changes made a difference. Like I got a couple cortisone shots, and they didn't help. But ultimately, what changed it was just like cut out alcohol, cut out like any inflammatory stuff, and that's completely kept it at bay. And now I've avoided having to get surgery because of that. So it's amazing.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I crashed my mountain bike, broke my collarbone pretty bad. Had to have surgery. I have like 9 titanium pins and a plate in my collarbone. And so there's about a 6-week period there where I didn't really play guitar. And it was good and bad in some ways. Physically, it was tough because if you ever break your collarbone, no, I'm not a doctor, but the mistake I made is I stayed in my sling too long and my shoulder froze. So for like 8 weeks, I couldn't lift my arm higher than this because my shoulder just didn't have the mobility. So that made guitar playing really tough. But like I said earlier, it forced me out of some ruts in my playing because I just physically couldn't play the guitar. So it was, I was like messing around with synthesizers. I was working on programming drums. I was doing other stuff outside of guitar that helped me, you know, in my musicianship.
During any point in your journey, did you develop like a habit or like a less than ideal technique that you've tried to kind of fix or you've fixed in the past?
I feel like most of my playing is pretty bastardized. Like it's,
oh, come on.
You know what I mean? Like it's not truly classical or truly like the way anyone would really do anything, but I think I might have just got a little top heavy on the sweeping. So it got to a point where I just couldn't play without doing it. You know, it's just like that was my go-to move. I think I'm better nowadays. It's still there, but it's not like Yngwie on steroids where it's like everything is swept, you know? So that was probably a bad thing. I probably went so hard at that because I really wanted to learn the technique that it became kind of like a crutch or a trick, you know, rather than a decision of music, you know, an artistic choice or something. So I would say I had to kind of figure out a way around that.
Anybody who knows my playing will know that I'm primarily a left-hand guy, legato guy. And that is due to problems, I would say, that have been placed into my picking technique from when I was naive and young. So my alternate picking technique in particular is pretty poor in that I have a lot of raw speed, but have developed a bounce when I cross strings on my right hand. And anything like that that's like a tension-based thing, if you've learnt it at a young age or even an older age and you've baked it in, is incredibly hard to remove. Very, very difficult to remove. So at this point, because I have the ability to express myself with the technique I do have, that has very much been put to the side. And every now and again, I'll pick the guitar up and go, right, let's try and fix this problem. And I find it very, very difficult to. But I think most guitar players end up with a preference for one technique. What I should say at the end here is don't stress if particular techniques are hard for you, because you will find a way to express yourself.
I can't think of a specific bad habit, but I guess the closest thing would be like I went through several phases of trying to figure out the best picking style for me, and I feel like maybe jumping around between those, like using a pick and then I used finger picks for a while and then just using bare fingers, kind of threw me off for a little bit. But once I landed on just using only fingers, then I was good to go.
I had some real issues. My first issues came after college, and I used to play with my wrist bent, like, because that's the way Randy Rhoads played in a poster or two. And I realized, as the doctor said when I started going, he's like, well, do this and then do that, and then tell me what one feels easier. And it was like, so I had to change everything, it was fairly quick because it made playing easier. It stopped any kind of carpal tunnel that was starting to kick in at that point. Because I was practicing like a lunatic, it was right after college, like 8 hours a day kind of thing. It was for the best. It took some time, but that was really good.
No, I think I've kept any bad habits that I've had. Yeah, I remember when I was in college, I was in music school, and I was in a lesson and I was playing jazz chords with my teacher, and he didn't like how I used my thumb to hit the root notes. And he told me that's bad technique and you should really try to work on not using your thumb for anything. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I didn't listen to him because it's just it feels better. It feels more natural to me to use my thumb to play certain grips. And I'm like, Hendrix did it all the time. And a lot of people do that. But like, I do that a lot in my jazz playing. No problem. Never been an issue. So what's bad technique to someone could be fine or natural to somebody else.
Yeah, I think one of the worst ones for me was reconciling normal playing technique and good vibrato and bending technique. So it was wanting to be here to get that real pivot point for the vibrato and bends, and obviously having to be more here for single note stuff, but too much favoring this, and then not really having that reach or flexibility with third and fourth fingers. That was one that was pretty early on in my journey, but I definitely had to keep an eye on for a while and pay attention to make sure that wasn't creeping back in, because it limited the dexterity and really fluidity with the left hand.
Yeah, when I was younger, which there's nothing wrong with this, but I figured out something else worked better for me. I would hold my pick like this, like the Santana thing, where you do two fingers. And I realized that I could pretty much only do like kind of like really fiery, fast blues licks with it, but I couldn't be like really articulate and precise with it. I still played like that all the way through high school. And then by the time I got to like community college, like I was comfortable with this, and I've stuck with that ever since. And that way, then I could get into hybrid picking too.
Dude, absolutely. I remember when I first started playing guitar around 12, a buddy of mine was in like a local rock band, and he was like my first guitar hero. And he wouldn't really give me lessons, but he let me borrow a guitar. He'd give me pointers and stuff. He would jam with me. He'd let me show up to his rehearsals. And he noticed that the one thing I always did that bugged him was I never used my pinky for anything. It was always just these three fingers. And he's like, dude, you got to start playing with that pinky, or else it's going to like bite you in the ass when it comes to like you progressing as a musician. And it totally did. And I still have a very weak pinky. But I can use it sometimes, but I still very heavily rely just on these three fingers.
Yeah. I used to do this, like, I still do it sometimes, but this like right hand rake thing, which is cool sometimes, but I would really overdo it when I listen to like old stuff of my playing from back in the day. If I would take a solo or something, it was all just like this wannabe John Mayer rake thing, and it just was not tasteful or good. So And I'm sure I'm doing stuff now that I'll look back on in 10 years and be like, Jesus Christ, what, like, that wasn't good, or that sound wasn't right. I used to use way too much reverb. I would use reverb as a crutch, especially in live shows where it just made me feel safer for some reason. And you go back and listen, it's like, dude, you can't hear anything that I'm playing because I'm just like surrounded in this wash of ambience.
What is your most tried and true practice routine?
Something consistent has always worked for me. So, for example, I've had times where I was practicing several hours a day, and I had this whole regiment, like this whole discipline of these scales and these chords and all these different topics that I do over the course of several hours. Seemed like at a certain point it would turn into noodling. So it wasn't really like a true discipline. So if I could come up with something that I could do every day, I would love to practice hours a day, but I can absolutely practice 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, I can find that. That's easy to find. That's easy to achieve every day. But if it's multiple hours, sometimes I can't do that every day. So therefore, it's not really benefiting me. So I always try to go with play for 30 for sure. If I can play longer, cool. But technically, if I just keep it consistent between 30 and an hour of a very focused thing, I tend to do the best. Not a lot of things, just like a focused thing.
I've never had one. I've met people on both sides of this argument. Some people thrive on a practice routine. They thrive on organisation, basically. And then you tend to find that a lot of aspects of their lives are very organised. They keep notes for things. They have really well-organised diaries, so on and so forth. I'm not that person. Never have been. I've had periods in my life where I've been obsessed with particular players. Done a bunch of transcription. I've had periods in my life where I've been obsessed with a particular harmonic device, a particular scale even, a particular chord progression, a particular technique, a particular whatever. And I've just gone down that road basically, and until the next thing is turned up. And that really is how I've made progress in my playing. By organising my time into small chunks where I'm going to do this for 5 minutes, this for 5 minutes, so on and so forth. It's never worked for me essentially. Now that's not advice. You will find the way that works for you, but that's what worked for me.
I would say just transcribing solos, and then I'm a big fan of jamming along with backing tracks, and usually I make my own backing tracks, and I'll make one for whatever song that I just learned a solo from, play the solo of that I just learned, and then kind of expand off of it and sort of trying to incorporate aspects of it into my own improvisation.
No, I mean, I try to do technique every day just because I think that's like going to the gym, or at least I'm told. If that stuff's easy to go. Like, I find that painfully, the older I get, the faster it goes, or it takes longer to get back. So just every day I'll just, run scales, or while watching TV, do that. Now, if you're just learning, I would not recommend that because then you're not paying attention. But you know your scales, you went to school and the whole thing, you got the whole thing together. So when you can do that. And I think it was a quote from Itzhak Perlman. He says his favorite time to practice is during basketball season. That's something I do every day. I play, and for a kind of emotional or just kind of musical thing, I end up playing like a blues by myself every day. Just some sort of thing, and then try to just expand on that, and it just kind of gets me into a creative mindset.
It's basically a kind of a play on one of John Petrucci's warm-up exercises, where it's basically, kind of like 4 fingers on a string, going up and down, really doing that with a metronome and just kind of working up the speed. And that was I used that as a warm-up when I was warming up, but it actually improved my picking accuracy and my alternate picking a lot. So I'll do that, and then there's another thing that he does where it's kind of like string skipping. Just those 2 things, which are kind of warm-ups, actually really helped my playing and my technique in the long run. It's kind of that whole Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid thing where it's like you don't realize that this is actually being a benefit.
A lot of the stuff that I do nowadays is sort of meditative. So I would say something that I do often would be to just do these breathing exercises and then just play like single notes and try and really connect the breath and the instrument and the note. Try and make them feel as one. I just do that for however long I'm feeling it. Sometimes it's just a couple notes. Sometimes it ends up being like 20 minutes. So a lot of times I kind of start there and then sort of let it blossom into whatever I'm most drawn to.
One of the best things I ever read came from Scott Henderson, and it was on learning vocab and then implementing it. And it's like, keep the phrases short, keep them at most between like 4 and 8 notes. And then if you're not learning to play into that new line and out of it with things you would already play, your odds of ever being able to use it or even retain what you learn is next to 0.
I don't have a consistent practice routine, but lately I've been playing a lot of Bach violin sonatas and partitas and trying to work out cool fingerings for guitar and trying to make them sound like they're supposed to be on guitar. And it's amazing how it gets your hands going, and it's beautiful music, some of the greatest music ever written too. So I feel like the effort is worthwhile, but it's almost like it's like a puzzle. You're like, okay, what's the coolest fingering for this group of notes, you know, or the coolest shape, and then you have to go to the next group of notes and like, okay, if I get to that shape, how do I go to that, you know, like just like finding the most elegant like place to play it on the guitar. It's good for the brain, it's good for the hands, it's good for the ears.
I don't practice. I just learn music. I listen to music, and that is tried and true. Like when it comes time to implement a new technique into the arsenal, or if there's something I'm working on, I pull out tunes. Like if I'm looking for ear training, I just go back to my favorite songs. Like I use the song Night Moves by Bob Seger to teach interval training because the melody line doesn't start on a 1-3 or a 5. Like the little too tall could have used a few. It starts in 6. So it's like I try to get people to identify things out that. But to me, like practice is playing music. That's how you practice. Play along with records.
I really love the thing of like if I'm trying to get better at playing over a chord progression or a standard or something, playing a steady stream of eighth notes.
Yeah.
I get so much out of that. Slow tempo, you know. But I find if I do that for like 10 minutes and then just play over the tune again and let myself play whatever I want, I'm like way more aware and creative, and using it actually makes my phrasing better even, which you wouldn't think, but it does. I love that. And I mean, I really like, as not thrilling as it might seem, I really like the rudimentary stuff. I just feel like it pays off so hard, like going over your arpeggios and all the inversions of them and your scales and stuff and interval exercise, just all that stuff. Those are your paints, you know? So the more you gain those, then the more fun you ultimately have.
I always make a chart of anything I'm practicing. Now, obviously, I don't write music or read music, but I just make simple like iReal Pro chord charts that give me like the structure of the song and everything, and I'll put like little kind of notes up above that'll remind me of what lines I'm supposed to play. They make sense to no one other than me. If I were to show them to you, you'd be like, I have no idea what this says, but to me it makes sense. I always practice and rehearse music right before I go to bed. If it's the last thing I do before I go to sleep, I'll retain it way better than if I was running it earlier in the day and then, you know, doing a million things after that. My favorite trick to know if I have a song down is I'll listen to another song, like either with headphones on or really loudly to distract me. And if I can, through whatever I'm listening to, remember a melody or a rhythm or how something goes, I'm good. If I can't, then I need to keep practicing until it sticks better. So if I can pick it through my brain while being distracted by another song, then I know I have it down.
Like I said, I don't have a practice routine. I never have. And that's just me. I'm not advocating not practicing. I wish I could practice. I would be a much better guitar player and musician if I could sit down and practice every day. My brain doesn't have it. So what I really do is I kind of wait for moments of inspiration. Like if I'm listening to something, I'm like, oh shit, I got to figure that out. And I learn songs. I learn parts. I learn songs. And I'll just work them into my playing. And that's just what works for me. But, you know, like I said, I wish I could practice more because I think I would be a much better guitar player.
What was the single most effective thing you've learned that opened the door to playing the guitar?
Probably triads. Yeah, not scales, not the caged, all that. Like, and I've, you know, we've all read about all those things, and I get how people look at it, but really like triads, and then understanding modes not as, well, Mixolydian is if you play the C scale, but starting on G, you know, like instead of the academia's way of approaching it like an improviser going, okay, this is a major triad, but I put a flat 7 to it. What does that do to music? Like once I started understanding that stuff, it was like, I don't need an entire scale to play an idea. Just much like we have the entire alphabet, but for me to say something meaningful to my wife, I might say, I love you. A couple words didn't use most of the alphabet. So it was like triads really showed me that. Like here's the chord tones, and then here's all the stuff around it. And if you understand that, you can make phrases.
So for me, it has to really be being able to visualize the fretboard with a lot of freedom, because the guitar is quite an abstract instrument, and I think I've got a system I don't use the system that is often taught, or some of the systems that are often taught. I use some 3-note per string and some caged and all that stuff, but I have this intervallic-based system visualizing the fretboard that came over the years that really, I know people use this phrase a lot and it's a cliche, but unlocked the instrument for me. So if I wanted to be able to play over, I had this goal of being able to play over any set of chord changes just at sight. Seems a strange goal now, but it was the goal. And so that actually unlocked a huge amount of stuff for me. So I really feel like now I can see harmony on the guitar. I am not a guy who can just hear everything immediately and just play it. I don't have that golden ear connection to fingers. It's got a lot better over the years, and it's not bad, but it wasn't there as a kid. I didn't have that. No one in my family has that. It's not like a genetic trait that's passed down.
A big kind of epiphany moment for me with improvising and soloing in general was learning the modes and learning them in the sense of, like, say you're playing in a song in G major, and you can basically move up your positions based on basically going up 2 frets up to your A Dorian and going up 2 frets to your B Phrygian and so on, and kind of using that as a framework to basically be able to play in any position, depending on what key the song is in. That was a huge mind blow moment for me.
Everything up and down one string, like seeing the guitar as like 6 individual pianos in a way, because guitar players, it's the great thing about guitar is, if you can play 3 chords, a pentatonic scale, you can kind of be in a band, but if you want to get past that, it's difficult. And seeing everything as pictures, guitar is very picture oriented, which is awesome in certain ways, as we know. I want to play in B flat. Okay, I'm just going to move up a half step from A. Now I'm in B flat. But then you're stuck in where So when you start to learn the guitar as one string at a time, you start to see how it functions and how you can, this is the same as that, this is that. And then you have musical choices of, well, the E string sounds like this, but that same note on the G string sounds like this. And then you start getting into guys like that we love, whether it's Eric Johnson or Jeff Beck or someone, you're like, oh, you start to choose where you want to play something because it sounds different.
I accidentally discovered downward pick slanting when I was trying to learn how to play fast. One day, it just suddenly came to me because I stood up. When I was sitting down and playing guitar, the guitar is kind of higher on the body, so my wrist would fall a certain way and blah, blah, blah. And it was with a Les Paul, actually. When I stood up with my Les Paul and I had it slung lower, it made my wrist and my forearm hang a different way. And I don't know if you can see, but my wrist kind of naturally fell like that. And that actually put the pick slanting, the downwards pick slanting was automatic like that. And I started to learn how to play faster that way.
Just learning a few scales that, it's kind of, maybe it's silly a little bit, but just realizing that if I play just these notes in various orders, that's like a solo. Before then, I was like, I have no idea how people could possibly solo.
Transcribing because coming from playing violin, you play the music on the sheet of paper, and still in my parents' basement, there's one of those giant Tupperware containers just of tab. Of Metallica, Satriani, Vai, Petrucci, Zeppelin, all that stuff, because that's how I thought you learned. And it's when I always had a pretty good ear. I think one of the best things for my development is when I was a kid, we'd be driving around, my dad, to entertain me, but it was actually ear training class, would say rhythms or sing melodies and have me repeat them back. So I was good at that, but I didn't put together the pieces of, all these greats, they were doing this with records and just figuring out the licks and then how to use them. So it was transcribing, 100%.
The thing that made me discover that guitar was cool as a jazz instrument was trying to play Bach violin stuff as a guitar player. So initially, I thought as a jazz instrument, the guitar was an inferior horn and an inferior piano bastardized into one instrument. But checking out this what I call the gym hall approach of playing this Bach violin stuff, where you sustain certain notes together, and you sort of start to blur the distinction between lines and chords. This linear approach and chordal approach. It's really exaggerated in Bill Frisell and even Schofield, and then combine that with blues. I discovered that the guitar is the coolest.
Probably becoming aware of intervallic structure. And I think that scopes out a little bit and it becomes more of a thing of music. than just guitar, because it started allowing me to be more efficient in the studio as a session player. Like I was able to take a ukulele and cut a ukulele part, even though I'm not a ukulele player. When there would be a random need for a banjo, they're like, man, can you play this banjo part? And it's like, yeah, on a pop country thing, sure. It's not requiring Bela chops to play over a 1-4-5-6 thing. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think becoming aware of intervallic structure, becoming a good chart reader, becoming really able to listen while I play, like in a live setting, like that's something that's really important that a lot of guys don't develop till later in life. But clubbing through my late teens into my early 20s, I was like, yeah, if I hear something, I want to be able to acknowledge it instantly, and join up. So those kinds of things, they're more scoped out than the guitar, but I think those were the most important.
Maybe the first time that anybody ever asked me to learn like a bunch of music for like maybe some money, and then you do it and you feel like you're just like not getting it and you're not retaining any information and you're struggling so hard and you're scared shitless that you're going to let them down, and then you get up there and it's all there, the work paid off, and then you realize like how much more you learn from that than like if you're just like on your own agenda playing for fun. And I mean, I can't speak for everybody, so I'll just say when I'm doing that, there's no way to not slide into your habits and in your comfort zone. So I feel like the first time that anybody had me do that, I really realized how like saying yes to things that you're scared of make you so much better than just sitting in a room wondering if you're any good.
I think with me, it was like, so when I like solo and stuff, I don't know scales. I don't know, like if I'm playing certain notes, I couldn't, like, I know a major and a minor and a pentatonic, and that's kind of it. So I think with me was sort of like what you would look like as a scale and intervals. I just look at like shapes. Like, okay, like moving up, I have to go up 2 frets instead of one because that 1 fret's not going to work. So it's literally just looking at like little Lego pieces where it's just like that's a whole Lego piece, that's a half Lego piece. Like that's how I look at everything. So I guess once I really unlocked what the shapes look like that work with what I'm hearing, and then getting so connected with that knowing, just hearing it, my fingers just know where to go and what's going to work and what's not going to work. I wouldn't know when I got to that point or how I got to that point, but just knowing, trusting my ears enough and trusting the motion of my fingers on the neck to know like this is going to work.
Now I know it as the caged system. At the time, I didn't know that that's what it was. It was just learning triads. But triads, and we just finished up a course on this that's coming out now on the cage system. But for me, I think triads are the gateway drug for understanding your fretboard. At least they were for me, where it's like once I figured out I could play an F major in all these different positions up and down the neck, and then I could do everything that I was doing in the open position but anywhere on the neck, and I could play chord progressions in different places. I could write melodies or solos in different places. Triads were really what like got me into that, and I still think about that stuff heavily now. Like that's still how I visualize the fretboard, is mostly triad based.
How do you approach learning new techniques and incorporating them into your playing?
Those for sure. I let that be known that this is an IOU I'm going to get back in like 6 months. So like if I sit down to learn a new lick or a new technique, I want to take it through everything I already know. So if I learn the technique, it might be arpeggio based, so it's going to work better on arpeggios. But could I do this same technique or this same concept through a scale? So I try to take it through all the lenses that I know. That way it's kind of leaning into things I already do well, and then it might come out in my playing sooner. I do not force it. I just understand that, okay, if I do it, I got to keep it consistent. It's new. I'm going to have to do it every day. But I just understand it's not coming out for a while, and I shouldn't force it out. And a lot of times I'll get in a performance or something and somebody recorded it and it goes on YouTube and I go back and watch it and I'm like, there's the thing, it's happening. But that was 2 years ago that I was working on that. So I just accept that it's just part of the journey. I don't force it in before the weekend or before tonight, and just try to keep it consistent.
So if I heard someone using a technique that I really liked and I was very interested in the early days, it was because I was learning songs and solos by the guitar players I loved. So I would literally learn them from tab books and then try and, incorporate those techniques based on what that player was specifically doing. Later down the line, when I was a bit more knowledgeable and a bit more nuanced in my practice, I would do what a lot of people do. I would write things that involved that technique in order to get it into my playing. And then later down the line, and this is really important for me, my particular approach, is I would improvise with them very, very slowly. So I would have every single aspect of the technique identical to how it would be if I was playing in real, like, world scenario with a tempo, you know, with a subdivision, but I would do it incredibly slowly, making sure the technique doesn't alter at all. And that way I can use the technique in an improvisational setting as opposed to it being just fixed things that I can play.
A little bit at a time. Oh, perfect example. Okay, so I'm like, man, I should be able to play these Eric Johnson things a little faster. I've got good technique, but it's kicking my butt. I economy pick, I do all this. I'm like, why can I not get this? So one of my students like, you ever watch the Troy Grady videos? I'm like, no, but I think they're cool, but I just never watched them. And I was like, oh, if I just, what he talks about, angle my pick and do this escape thing, no, I did, but not the same way. And I was like it was literally like, you know, when doctor says, you know, hey doc, it hurts when I do this, well, then don't do that. And then it's like immediately just made it happen. So then I would take that and start working on it, you know, the mechanics of it. So I'm going to take my time, take a little bit of the idea at once and start to kind of work through it. And then it starts to expand. I think when you try to do all of it at once and go nuts, it doesn't stick.
In terms of learning them, I guess I would say a lot of the things that I would pick up is just from records or hearing other people do them. So a lot of times, if I do hear something I particularly like, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a guitar, it could be like trying to emulate a saxophone or something, trying to make it feel as close to that original recording as I possibly can, even if it is a different instrument, trying to make it feel like they made it feel. Trying to do that a lot, playing it with the recording and without the recording, maybe with a click slower if I need to, you know. And then in terms of actually using it, I try not to think about that at all. I just figure if I spend enough time with it and really getting into this recording, then it will probably come out in some way, even if it's not the exact thing. It'll come out in some way, sort of on its own.
To incorporate it into my playing, I feel like I have to compose something using it, because if I can write an idea, I have to think deeply about what it's doing and I sort of fit it into my scheme. And then if I compose something, then I have to learn it in order to play it. So I sort of have to master it. I guess that's the short answer. I have to write something that has it.
I think it's more of a waiting game than a forcing it to happen game. You do the best you can and you have fun with it and you go easy on yourself. Well, I sort of do it until I go nuts and give up on it. And then like 3 years later, it turns out I'm doing it, you know? And for me, it's usually more like, it's not a physical technique thing. I mean, maybe some, but for the most part, it would be more like a new scale I want to use, or like a new way of thinking about improvising, or a new, like, kind of like, I don't know, outside tool to use or something like that. It'd be more along those lines.
I have kind of given up on speed. I'm not a fast player. I'm never going to be a fast technical player. And I realized for me, it's because I'm just not interested in that style of playing. It doesn't, you know, I've no problem with it, but speed doesn't interest me. But there's something about slide guitar that just speaks to me. And obviously there's, you know, your Derek Trucks and your Dwayne Allmans, but there's guys like Joey Landreth, Ariel Posen, who I love, Dylan Adams from Florida, I think is one of the best slide players alive today. Ry Cooter, Sonny Landreth, all these amazing slide players. When I listen to these guys, Blake Mills, it's like, oh, that's what I want to sound like. I want to be able to do that. So yeah, slide has been a really, really fun thing. Like if I want to sit down and play guitar to have fun, I play slide.
I mean, a lot of times it'll just be, you know, I won't be actively seeking out anything. I'll just come across something cool that someone plays, or, you know, I'll run across just in my Instagram feed a tutorial such as one of yours will pop up, and it'll just make me think about something in a different way, and I'll just kind of do it. I don't know. I don't have a specific approach. Yeah, just whatever I come across, I just kind of try and imitate, and then, yeah, just try and incorporate it into my playing.
I can learn the techniques, but to implement them in my playing naturally is always a hard thing to do. A lot of times I might just learn a lick or a phrase and really practice it to be able to nail it at any time. And it usually starts with that. And usually once I learn a phrase that it gets into my, you know, bag of licks, then I might modify it in a way, turn it around, twist it around, and kind of make it my own, whether it's changing the phrasing or certain notes or certain patterns or something. So it always starts with the littlest thing that the smallest thing that I can learn and retain, and then I'll take it from there. I just wait till it comes naturally. As has other techniques that I've learned in the past, it's just like at some point it finally clicks, and then you're like, oh, okay, that was easy.
What is your advice for aspiring guitarists looking to find their own voice and signature sound on the instrument?
Be patient. I feel like I've just started to get to that point, I've been playing live professionally for almost 30 years now. So did not have the sound when I was 11, didn't have it in high school, constantly searching for it, and whatever money I could afford to try a new amp or a new pedal, always doing that. But just understanding that it's going to come over time. And sometimes it has to do with the gear. We hear a lot of people say it's all in the fingers. But to me, it was like, no, it's like the fingers is where you begin. But there is a huge difference in the pickups and, what I mean? Like, and even just the radius of the neck, like that affect for me how I sound, So if I play a certain guitar, I feel like I sound different on that guitar. And maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe I need to get to the point where I can always sound like me. But I feel like I'm still in that journey, but I'm closer to it. Be patient, try a lot of things. I think that's the best we can do.
Try and emulate your favorite players and understand that you're going to fail in emulating your favorite players. And I think in that is where you develop your sound. At least that's what happened for me. I tried to sound like Robin Ford, did not sound like Robin Ford. I tried to sound like David Gilmour. I tried to sound like The Edge. I tried to sound like, all these players. And by putting together this weird sort of melting pot of influences, I kind of developed my own thing, for better or for worse.
As someone who's still trying to do that, I think one of the problems, a lot of the guys that we really look up to don't do other things. They do that thing, So if you want to learn how to play some Halsworthy stuff, as I mentioned before, which is impossible. Like there's only one. And only thing Alan Halsworth did was work on being Alan Halsworth, So that would be my thing is like, you got to learn your history and then just be your own person. You got to really focus in on that. So my advice would be, if you really, really want your own voice, I would figure out what it is that you really, really want to do stylistically and really commit to that and realize that I didn't, because, for a long time, that it's okay not to be great at other things.
Listen to as much different kinds of music as you can and put yourself in situations that maybe aren't the most comfortable as much as you can. Whether, if someone asks you to do like a recording session playing a certain kind of music that you never do, maybe just do it, and try and see if you can find a way to make it work for you.
Listen to as much music and as wide a variety of players as you can. Try and write down as many ideas as you can, because, as in soloing, line-based ideas or comping ideas, because if you keep a diary of some of those ideas, this is one thing I am good organisationally with, or I used to be. I don't do it so much anymore. I would write down ideas that I had, and then I would try and develop those ideas and try and run with them for a long time. So I really, really explored those ideas, because if you just transcribe other people's ideas, what you end up with is a catalogue of things that other people have done. And if that catalogue's wide enough, you probably will start to find your own sound. And you'll find things that are you, things that appeal to you and sounds that you like. And then you'll start to find those things happen when you improvise. They just start to come out in your playing. It takes a long time. But exploration is the name of the game.
Try to find artists who are not guitarists who really inspire you, because I feel like if you only listen to and try and transcribe guitarists, then it makes you just sound very guitaristic and like a guitar player. So I feel like, at least for me, a huge thing that's helped me find my sound is branching out from just guitarists, listening to horn players, listening to singers, listening to pianists, and just all types of instruments, and just sort of taking knowledge from all of those and combining it into my own.
I think I'm confident saying that I've figured out what my signature sound is, but for a long time, because I was, a working musician playing with artists and cover bands and all that stuff, and really not playing me, I had a different path. Whereas some guitarists that automatically go into, I'm going to be a solo artist, they might have a different way of doing it. But for me, I kind of had to slow down and stop trying to be the hired gun kind of chameleon guy and figure out what I enjoy playing, what I enjoy hearing. I think it really came down to that. It's like, what do I want to hear from a guitar player? And let me do that.
Goes back to transcribing, because I think it really is like that melting pot of You can even take 3 guitar players who have the same influences, but they're going to be drawn to different phrases and different things from those influences, and the combination of all of those pieces is really what's going to give you your own sound. I also think it's transcribing, it's also application. So it's advice to aspiring guitar players. Go play with as many different musicians. Go play as many gigs of different styles as you possibly can. It'll benefit you. I've played modern country gigs. I have played funk gigs. I have faked my way through cocktail hour jazz gigs really badly. But I did it and it benefited me.
Have a variety of influences and don't be scared to try to sound like them. And in doing so, you're going to sound like yourself. Unless you're super gifted, you'll sound like a clone. So very few of us are that gifted to sound just like our heroes. You know.
I kind of think that having your own voice doesn't necessarily mean not sounding like your influences. This is a big family tree here with guitar and instruments. Everybody sounds a little bit like somebody else, and then generations down the line, who knows what the hell guitar is going to be like. To put all that pressure on yourself to be completely singular and unique and like you're going to just completely reinvent the thing, that's a lot of pressure. I think it's nice to have the humility to just have fun with guitar and love your influences and sound like whatever you want to sound like and be a beautiful part of that family tree. That's great. But I do think it's way more fun to play when you do not worry about what other people have done and just do what you think is good. It's also easier too. Contrary to popular belief, I think it's kind of almost easier to be yourself than to be somebody else.
Acquire as big a buffet of music as possible, because your voice comes from having so many different flavors and different inputs that now those inputs become unrecognizable and they sound like you. When I hear Brent, I can hear Jerry Reed, I can hear George Benson, but I don't hear them. I hear Brent. When I hear Eric Johnson, I hear Hendrix, right? I hear some Wes Montgomery at times. I hear some Stevie Ray isms from time to time. I hear Clapton, but I hear Eric, right? Steve Morse, any of them. I think the advice is definitely just acquire so much music on your buffet, and all those ingredients make your little bowl of gumbo. And then you can see the different ingredients, but it's you. And you can only do that if you have that much input. Like, you can't do it if you've only got 3 bands that you listen to.
I would say definitely play as many different styles as you can and learn as many different styles as you can. Genres, everything. And once you find a million different styles and like sort of just techniques and ways of playing, and you get them all down and you have them all in your head, you kind of start to Frankenstein them all a bit. And then it becomes this very unique thing because you just have so many influences from different things. Like if you just study one guitar player, you're going to sound like that one guitar player. And you might be able to sound just as good as that guitar player, but you're going to sound like that guitar player. So, also another huge thing for me is like, I never really tried to play like guitar players. When I play guitar, when I approach soloing, I approach it like a voice.
How do you maintain creativity and avoid getting stuck in a musical rut?
Yeah, for me, that was just trying a bunch of different things. So I'm not a jazz guitar player, but I play jazz. Because, I don't know, I always found that people that were really, really good at something, like, oh, he's a great blues player. It was like, why is that the only category? Like, why isn't it just great musician all around? So I tend to find people find their lanes and they get really good at that, but they have these holes. I don't feel like I was always afforded that. Every scenario I got into, it was like, I gotta survive. So I might need to learn how to play jazz, at least well enough that the audience doesn't know better. I might play with a bass player and him be like, and his timing or whatever their complaint might be. And I got to go work on that. But I mean, I'm also a rock guitar player. I'm also a blues guitar player. So it just feels like I have to do it all to survive. And so I have. And so none of them I'm like a master at, but I've always been able to be creative because I had to learn this other thing and I let it teach me something. And even if we don't do tapping in jazz, I do. And that's creative. It's not traditional, but to me, it's like, that's me, and I cross a lot of lines.
This to me is really important actually, because I have found myself in a rut recently. One thing I would say is the best experiences I've ever had on the instrument that have made me come away from those experiences and think, man, I cannot wait to work on X, Y, Z is by playing with other musicians. You must play with other musicians, because if you sit in your studio, your bedroom, your room, wherever the space is that you play, and you only ever play on your own, and you watch other guitar players, but you never interact with them in a real musical experience, you will end up in that scenario where you can't see a way forwards. Music is called playing music for a reason. It's supposed to be a fun, interactive, communal sport. It's not a sport, a communal activity. It's got to be with other people. So I cannot emphasize that enough. If you are struggling to make progress or see a way forward with your playing, try and find some other people to play with.
Try and listen to new stuff or go see music. I mean, sometimes going to see music hits you differently than hearing it on recording too. I would even say that maybe if you hear something and you don't particularly like it, maybe listen to it several times, because you might start to find something in it that really opens up different doors for you.
You can't. You just can't. A big lesson I've learned recently is that you can't turn on creativity when you want it, which sucks, because when you work in creative work full time, it's like, man, really need an idea right now. I really need, an approach right now, but you can't do that. It just kind of comes when it does, and goes when it goes. And so I think it's important to be prepared to jump in when creativity does strike. And that means like having your space set up in a way where it's conducive to being able to just jump in and get to work. And in terms of like avoiding musical ruts, you can't. You're going to hit them. So, like I said earlier, I think there's ways to get out of them, but to expect to never hit a musical rut or to always be creative, I think is unrealistic.
I think what definitely helped me a lot was trying to carve out time to make my own music and do my own thing. I feel like when I get really sort of just in that musical rut, I have like my own solo project. It's called Carousels. I'll work on stuff with that, or I'll try to just book a last minute show, and it just doing something that isn't a job and is completely just my own thing to do brings a whole new level of just joy and refreshment to me musically. So I think, if you're playing for people and you're trying to just work on things that are really work essentially, try to go back to the fun and the play side of music.
Everything from listening to as much music as possible, a lot of creativity as a guitarist. Sometimes I listen to other guitar players. Sometimes I listen to singers. Sometimes I listen to piano players. So I would say don't pigeonhole yourself into just listening to guitar music. And sometimes when I'm in a rut, the easiest thing for me is just to not play guitar for a little bit. And when I pick it up after a couple days, then everything feels fresh and I have new ideas and I'll come up with new licks that I've never played before. So it's just giving your mind a rest.
I maintain creativity by having a concept, like a thought experiment that I want to try a bunch of different options, like find out all the mathematical possibilities of, say, this chord, or, like how many tonalities does this thing fit in, or, how many ways can I think of this thing? And so with all these, and doing it with a looper, I feel like I've ever since discovering that, like I haven't run out of things to practice for, I don't know, probably 7 years. I've so many options of things to do. So yeah, get a looper pedal and then try to do thought experiments so you can explore.
That's a trick question. Everybody gets stuck. Finding a way out of it is really important, right? Like finding a way out of the stuck thing. And that could come usually, again, from listening to different music. Like if you're only listening to telly chicken picking stuff, you're going to get stuck because that has a wall on the genre. Every genre has a wall. That's a good and bad thing because that makes it a genre, that makes it a language. But it also means that like if you're stuck, you've got to go get some ingredients from something else. Like go listen to Indian classical music or whatever. Like, John Williams' score to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't know, just like anything that's not what you're listening to. I think that's how you find a way out. And for me, inspiration comes in other forms of media, like literally art, photographs. Like I always go, what is this? Like if this show is muted, what would I make the soundtrack to this show be?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer this. Like on one hand, you're like, well, how do you maintain creativity? Like, well, within the realm of just playing guitar, I probably have some answers for that. But the real big answer would probably be like, go learn how to do something else. The problem is I'm usually too scared to do that. Like I probably should learn how to use like Ableton or something like we were talking about, or trying to learn something that I just like don't already know how to do, even if it's something I feel like I'm never going to use. Like sometimes when I really get in a rut, I'll learn like a finger tapping pattern or something. Like something that I'm just never ever probably going to apply.
What's the number one piece of advice that you'd give to someone just beginning to learn the guitar?
Try to focus on the basics, whatever you're being taught, whether it's your instructor or something. Try to really focus on the basics because you are absolutely going to come back to them if you don't get those squared away. I think a lot of times beginners are in such a hurry to play a song, and I get it. It's very rewarding, but the song suffers because their technique isn't able to accomplish the song. They think it's, and I even thought this way, it's just play these notes and I play the song. But there's other things to it, and a lot of times the technique, if you haven't spent the time to do that, you just rush into a song, you're harming yourself, and you're going to have to come back and fix that anyway. So focus on those basics. Really take it to heart and get to the first song when you get to it. You know what I mean? Don't be in a hurry to get there. Don't let YouTube spiral you out of control.
Learn songs that you like and that you want to learn. Don't feel like you have to learn things just because people say like, oh, you need, this is something you need to learn. Just mainly, in the very beginning, just learn songs that are going to get you excited about playing the guitar.
Buy a guitar that you love the look of and leave it out. So it doesn't matter, Strat versus Tele versus Les Paul. None of that matters for a beginner. If you love the color and you're obsessed with how it looks and you leave it out on the stand, don't leave it in the case, but just lean it against your couch, leave it out on the stand, then every time you walk by that guitar, you're going to want to pick it up and play it. And that's the best way, I think, to get better, to improve.
If you're wanting to take it seriously, you want to actually become a good guitar player. It's not just a question of strumming out some tunes, which is a perfectly laudable and good thing to do. But if you want to take it seriously, I really, really recommend getting a good teacher, somebody who can help you with the basics and make sure that you're set up well. Because guitar is one of those instruments where, for some reason, we just get anybody picking up the instrument and not picking up the instrument, that's a good thing. You need to get those fundamentals right to have a pleasurable journey later on if you want to take it seriously. You don't want to be fixing a load of problems later on physically. I know that from personal experience because I was self-taught for the first 5 years of my playing, and I developed all sorts of bad habits that now I struggle to fix. So definitely get a good teacher, someone who can inspire you. I can't give you advice as to how to find that person, but I would say it's as important to find a good teacher as it is to have the will to want to learn and the desire to want to learn, I think, at that stage of guitar playing.
It's difficult. Be patient. Like, you get it. It's just you got to bust through it. And then you got to bust through the bar chords. Once you get past the bar chords, as you know, you're like, the ball starts rolling. So you just have to really be persevere.
Try and find some like-minded people that live around you and play with them. And you can just play covers. You can write as well if you want, but playing covers is enough to get you to see what it feels like to play with a band. That and spending a lot of time practicing on your own.
As long as you're enjoying it, you're doing the right thing. If it comes down to you're not enjoying playing or learning, then something might be up. For instance, when I started playing guitar, I was learning on a guitar that was very difficult to play. Action was super high; it would never stay in tune, and I thought it was me. And literally, it took buying a new guitar that was set up properly. It stayed in tune because it was a newer brand and everything, and it just made me fall in love with the guitar. So sometimes it's a gear issue if you start not enjoying it. Sometimes beginners, especially, your muscles aren't used to it. So sometimes it's just exercising those muscles and strengthening them. So it does take a little bit of work at the very beginning, but once you're over that initial hump, it does get a little bit easier.
Don't get frustrated with how physically demanding it is. Don't get caught up in trying to buy your way out. All guitars are hard to play when you first start playing. And if you got a cheap one, I grew up broke. My dad was a cop. My mom didn't really work that much, worked front office. We didn't have money, so I had the instruments that my granddad had, and they didn't play great. They didn't play like those Sirs. I guarantee you that, right? It was like old acoustics with high action. That's the beginner thing, is like the physical. That's probably the number one barrier for stopping people from playing the guitar. It sucks for the first however long. So don't let that bother you.
I don't know. I just keep trying to get better. Play every day if you can. Set little goals. Like learn this piece. I tend to alienate beginners, I think, because when I was a beginner, I was like I wanted to eat up the theory and the technique and play scales like crazy and arpeggios like crazy, and like, yeah, people quit if I do that stuff. So when I teach beginners now, I have to like teach stuff that like teach songs, like here's a tab of this song that you like, like, so I'll figure out what they like, and as a businessman, I just hope that they don't quit, so I've sort of tailored my approach so that they just, maintain their love for the instrument instead of trying to become a professional studio guitar player,
Make sure you're having fun. When it stops becoming fun, step away from it and come back when it's fun again. And don't get into this business with, it always sounds really messed up when I say this, but I say don't get in this business with the intention of like making money and making a living, because that's where people get really jaded and really bitter about everything. So I say approach this as fun, be smart, and just never stop having fun with playing music, because that's what we do. We play music. We don't work music. So just make sure that you're always just having fun with it.
Don't give up. It's gonna. I mean, it hurts at first. It's uncomfortable at first. So I would say give it a couple months before you make any concrete decisions about how you feel about it. Also, stuff that might seem not fun equals more fun later on. Like the more work you put in, the more fun it is to play with that toy.
What is the number one piece of advice that you'd give to an intermediate guitarist, especially one that has kind of plateaued?
Try to transcribe something new. Whether you like that song or not, if you just think it's impressive, or I don't really care to play classical. Yeah, but just learn a picking pattern and play it through some chords or something. You don't know what you might discover, and then that becomes part of your playing. So just constantly try new things. Don't be afraid. Don't shy away from music that you're unfamiliar with. Go ahead and learn it. Try to learn it. Let it teach you something. Mm-hmm. And I think you might take you down a whole nother path. That's why we get like the John Fives of the world, or the Andy Wood. What can't that dude do and play? Because he's so into trying all the different styles. It's so great. I really take a lot from that. Man, I'll just try something new. Just learn something new.
For intermediate guitar players, I would absolutely 100% say that time is the most important thing that you should be working on, bar none. It doesn't matter how many chords you learn, how many songs you can play. It doesn't matter what fancy techniques you might want to learn. You have to have good time, and if you have good time, everything you play will sound good. It's absolutely number one, bar nothing else for me. I think that goes for any instrument, but guitar players are particularly guilty of not having great time. So yeah, work on your time. And by that, at this point, at your intermediate level, I literally mean being able to play in time well. We're not talking about crazy time feel or anything, or different types of groove, nailing those. I literally mean just have good time, internal time, be able to feel time well, and be able to understand different subdivisions and be able to play them well against a groove or on your own is vital, really, really important.
If you're not already learning things by ear, then start trying to do that as soon as possible. Start trying to develop your ear and start learning some theory, but don't worry too much about learning all of it all at once while you're also trying to learn to play things. For me, the most important thing is to get stuff under your fingers by way of transcribing solos and stuff, and then work out the theory later.
It gets better. Concentrate on small things. Like, a lot of guys will, okay, learn this solo. And I'm like, okay, those are the notes. Now listen again and see how they play it. So there's those little things that that make you sound better. If you have decent vibrato, you're going to sound better. If your bends are in tune, you're going to sound a lot better. If your time is good, you're going to sound a lot better. So, Albert King, relatively small vocabulary, but brilliant. So what I'm saying is I try to explain to him, well, look, if you listen to Albert King solo, he's playing 5 licks all the time. But I buy it every single time he plays it. You know what I mean? It's still the greatest thing ever. My point is if you're working on your soloing and you're feeling like you're having a hard time, just try to refine what it is you already have. And that'll take you really far. And also carries on the other things too,
I would say don't be afraid to discover new things as far as different styles of music, different players, different techniques, because like what we're talking about, Mr. Miyagi, a lot of the times those styles can be implemented in the style of playing that you like to play. So let's say you're just like a heavy metal guy. Sometimes if you start listening to jazz, you might discover really cool ways of creating solos or phrasing a solo or coming up with different lines or rhythmic stuff. So don't be afraid to discover different things that you're not necessarily used to.
try and expand as many of your skills as you can. Like if you don't read at all, maybe sit down and start trying to read some music. Try and play some Bach music. That's great for practice of sight reading. But it could be anything. If you learn a lot of stuff through reading, maybe don't read it all and spend some time trying to develop your ears more. Try and be open to all the stuff that's out there and try and get into it a little bit.
I guess an intermediate guitar player, like that's tricky because there's so many. My headspace is so super nerdy that I could alienate intermediate guitar players too. But I think there's like we've all been there. We were once a beginner and then we were once intermediate. I think transcribing is helpful. I think playing scales is helpful. Improving your technique is helpful. Challenge yourself with. Like technically challenge yourself, like where you just pick something that's a little bit too hard to play, and then play it every day, and then eventually it starts going into your. So there's something called the basal ganglia, which is a part of your brain that regulates habitual motor memory. And once you've played something enough times, you're not thinking about every individual movement like from your cerebral cortex. It's actually been regulated by more like a whole bunch of things chunked together as a habit. And it's that point that you start. It feels good to play something, and of course, the process leading up to that is painful. Where you're learning a new piece, it sucks, and then you get to that stage where it's like starts to become really fun to play, and it's like that's that dopamine hit. It's like a drug. That's why people keep doing it. Try to attain that level where you start loving what you're doing as soon as you can, but don't just stay doing that same thing that you're good at. Try to introduce new things that are hard, and then you have a lot more things that are fun to play.
Listen to other music other than what you think you like. Like it always goes back to what your input is. I have guys tell me all the time, man, I'd love to play some bluegrass stuff. Or I have bluegrass guys like, oh man, you play all that Eric Johnson stuff, all that, shred stuff or whatever. Like, I'm like, yeah, but I listened to it. Like I didn't get there because I just woke up one day and tried to learn it. It's like I absorbed that language. Like if you don't know your favorite Roy Nichols solo and you want to play Telecaster like Brent Mason, you got a lot of listening to do. You got to know where it came from. There's no Rosetta Stone for learning different genres of music. There's no Rosetta Stone for jazz. You want to be a good jazz player? You got to listen to jazz. You have to know who Art Tatum is. You know what I mean? And if you don't know that, then you sure ain't gonna be able to play the genre. And if you don't know albums, like if you don't know The Bridge by Sonny Rollins, you're not gonna be able to play jazz. And I don't mean you don't even have to know how to play that album. You just have to know that album.
Don't discount the importance of like fundamentals. But by fundamentals, you mean like scales, modes, intervals, chords, arpeggios. And I guess also part 2 of that, or like a sort of appendage to that, would be to don't just like learn why something is the way that it is, and don't just learn the thing itself. Like if you learn a G major 7 arpeggio, that's great, but why is it a G major 7 arpeggio? Well, it's all the odd numbers of a G major scale. If you're at that point where you're intermediate, and assuming you've gotten that far, it means you want to go even further, right? Then you want to learn the backstory behind everything as much as you can.
Okay, so I get a lot of guitarists hitting me up, like saying, like, how do I get gigs? How do I do this? If your goal is to work and to get gigs and to like meet MDs, my biggest advice is and I tell this to people all the time, focus on making friends. Don't think about it as network. Don't think about it as connections, because that to me comes off as very opportunistic and kind of just disingenuine. Like we talked about before, finding your own voice, finding your own sound, find something that makes you kind of stand apart from everyone else. And the biggest thing in this community and this industry is your friends, because they're the ones who are going to throw your name into the hat. They're the ones who are going to vouch for you and vet you. There is not one gig I have that I got on my own. Everything has been someone recommending me to someone, or me recommending someone to something that they then recommended to me. So it's my entire career is based off of my community and my friends.
There's a few theory things that I would definitely have under my hands. Definitely work on your triads, like we talked about, and your major and minor pentatonics, up and down the neck. Like I think that combined with knowing your notes on the fretboard will get you 85% of the way towards anything you want to do in music. If you know your notes, you know your triads, you know your pentatonics all the way up and down the neck, I mean, you're really set. Record yourself as much as possible, whether that be with your phone or you put together a little recording setup, doesn't matter. and try and write stuff. Try and write music. It doesn't have to be full-blown productions. It doesn't, have to put out records. It can be little guitar parts. It can be little songs or chord progressions or whatever, but try and engage with that creative part of playing guitar, and I think that'll take you really, really far.
What role has music theory played in your development as a guitarist, and how do you strike a balance between theory and like instinct or ear when playing?
Yeah, you have to get to a point where they couple together. I think I'm there now, but I do remember learning theory for theory's sake for a long time. And then I would go out to, this is specifically when I was in Atlanta, I would go out to blues jams with all this theory for theory's sake and all these scales for scale's sake. And this old dude got up there and just played blues, just played it how it goes. And it just blew my mind. But there were still things in there intervallically that I couldn't understand after I had learned all this theory and stuff. So I think in the beginning there's just so much coming at you that to absorb it all, we got to practice it, and it doesn't come out like music. But nowadays, I look at it like I want somebody to stop me when I'm playing and go, what was that? And then I have to spell it out to you. But I didn't do it because I thought, oh, this mode is brilliant, I'm going to do that. So to me, if I play something and somebody stops me, it'd take me a minute, right? So I can say it, but to spell it out would take me a moment. So to me, theory needs to be that way. I have to be able to understand it enough that I can start to use it in sentences, but I'm not spelling it all out like that.
Theory side of things has played a huge role in my particular journey because it was one of the things I became very obsessed with. So I really, for some reason, again, I don't know why, just wanted to understand music theory on a very, very deep level. I mean, not insane. I'm no Jacob Collier, but just wanted to have a very good understanding of music theory. So that pushed my guitar playing to a different level because of my understanding of how musical elements fit together in a simple and deep way. It isn't at first, if you've never done it before, it's painful. But once you get reasonable at it, it's an incredibly rewarding thing because most of my improvisation is over memorized chord changes or reading chord changes from a chord chart. And that's a different part of the brain to just literally switching off and just playing by ear. So I would thoroughly recommend that you do that. It's a very, very useful skill. I'd thoroughly recommend it.
One is practice and one is playing. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think about music theory at all when playing, but it's things that I will have practice that will come out in my playing, hopefully, that may have started from a musical theory angle. It's not hard. It's not hard. The implementation of it can be difficult, yes, but understanding it. Anyway, so theory's been great for me because it expands, what it is I hear. You start working on a new idea. At first, it sounds weird, and then after a little while, you're like, oh, that sounds better. I like that now. So when I'm playing, I don't think about music theory. It's the stuff that I practiced ahead of time that comes out when you're playing, hopefully.
Music theory is just a way to communicate ideas with other musicians. That's it, in my opinion. That's all it is. I used to be afraid of it, and I used to think it was way more complicated than that, and it kind of held me back for a long time because I just thought that, well, to be a good guitar player, I have to know all this theory. I have to know, I have to use all the modes, and I have to use all this stuff, and the reality is you don't. It's just a way of communicating ideas and passing ideas and information along from teacher to student or from players of different instruments. So for me, that's really all it is now. Like, I don't know a ton of theory, especially when it comes to like jazz theory and things like that. I mean, I know the basics. I went to music school, but like most of the stuff I learned in music school, I never use, I never approach. I don't think in terms of modes. I don't play modally. I don't do any of that stuff.
I think music theory gave me a basis and kind of the rules to start out with, as far as like, for instance, what scales to play over certain chords or chord changes when, talking about like jazz stuff. And it just gives you a really good, baseline of how harmony works, how everything works. But when I'm actually playing, I don't think about music theory or that book stuff. Like the theory taught me certain things that I took and developed. I figured out certain licks that worked because of the stuff that I learned in music theory. But when I'm actually playing in the moment, it's a combination of using my ear and a combination of using what I learned in the past with the different phrases that I play. So I kind of treat them as two separate things.
I think the theory is great to help understand things. Like if you can understand something orally, that's even better. But then if you can expand that to understanding intellectually too, it's just going to give you a wider understanding of what the thing is if you can get into it from various points. In terms of when I'm playing, like I said before, it's like I try not to think too much about it at all. You know, it just sort of goes into your head and swims around in there. And then when you play, it kind of comes out through your filter. It doesn't really matter if you're actually playing the thing that you practiced. It's probably influencing what you're playing.
I always go to the instinct side of things first and foremost when I'm playing. So I got into the thing like when I was at Berkeley that, oh, music theory is going to change everything and make everything better. It's not. It's going to help you understand things. And I always say it's like all those happy accidents you have early on in your playing where you play something cool and you have no idea how to do it again. That's what music theory is going to give you. The ability to analyze that, get back to it whenever you want. So I can go through and analyze anything, do it in the way a theory textbook would give it to you, but that's not how I'm thinking when I'm playing. When I'm on a gig session stage, I'm relying on my ear first and foremost beyond everything else. I think that sometimes ear playing gets a bad connotation put with it. No, all the best players are playing by ear because I think we know a lot of guitar players who know a ton of theory, could teach college level theory classes, can't improvise their way out of a paper bag. And also know a lot of guitar players who know zero theory, have such a good ear that it just doesn't matter. They have their way of putting it together. For example, do I play modes? Yeah. Do I ever think I'm playing modes? No.
I'm a theory nerd, okay? So I love thinking about why music sounds good. And if something sounds good, there's a reason for it. And you can think deeply about why it sounds good and incorporate that idea into your playing, but you can think like, okay, what else can I do that also uses that thing? And so it's a way for you to be more creative. So music theory can offer a window into like other things that sound good. And then instinct happens when you've practiced something enough times to where you don't have to think about it. And if you've got this new theoretical concept, you're like, hey, let me work this out. And then you practice it enough times to where then it becomes instinct. So you've got this, what started as a concept now is a new instinct. So if all you did is just play your baby instincts without theory, then you're basically stuck playing, Guitar Center Saturday morning blues scales.
This is almost like a Jedi answer. It's like you've got to get to the point where you're using the force and it's happening on a subconscious level. Just like you read words on a screen, you're not reading the letters and you're not seeing the grammar and the punctuation. And even if all the punctuation's wrong, you can still read it. That's where the music and the theory needs to overlap into the playing and the instinct. Like it needs to get really blurred. Unfortunately, the only thing you can do to get there is time investment. You need to go play a billion gigs. Like I would say, if you're really studying theory and you're really gigging and you're really playing out, even if it's just a local club and you're studying theory off of Google, you got to have 700 gigs, 4 years worth of gigging and study before the instinct and the theory starts blurring. It ain't gonna happen in year one. I mean, it's gonna happen in less than 5 years, but it ain't gonna happen in year one for sure.
Theory has helped in the sense that, like, I remember going into sessions and, like, my first few sessions, they'd be like, yo, play me this A minor 6 chord. And I wouldn't tell them that I had no idea what that was. So I would have, like, a little app that would tell me how to shape the chords. And I'd, like, be like, give me a second, I'll go use the bathroom. And I would just go, like, look up the app and, like, find out, okay, that's how I'm supposed to do it. And then I would come back and pretend like I knew it. I've learned theory over time, and it's definitely helped, but it's something that eventually kind of molded with my instincts. It became like my ears now understand things and understand chords. Like I could hear a chord and I may not know what note it is, but I know exactly what chord it is. Like I hear the minor 6, I hear the minor 7, I hear the minor 9, things like that. So it's definitely helped with me being able to immediately walk into a session or a gig and complement the music and the bands very well.
How do you approach improvisation, and what tips do you have for creating memorable solos on the spot?
I'm not a great improviser compared to a lot of people that I know and a lot of people that I listen to. I can get around, but I'm just not a great improviser. I think, and it's because it's not something I work on very much. And like anything else in music, if that's something that you want to do, it's something that you have to work on. And I think there's plenty of great ways to work on it. starting with listening to great improvisers, transcribing what they're doing. I think transcribing is a really great way to get better at anything musical, but specifically with soloing and improvisation, because you're getting a direct look into what that person was thinking and what they were doing when they were improvising it. You can sort of reverse engineer some of those things. But I don't know, man. I feel like it's kind of the few times that I have gotten into sort of a flow state of improvisation, I don't know. I maybe I should ask you. Like, I don't know how to get back to that like sort of mindset of like just letting stuff kind of happen and letting it flow out. I find it really hard to access that part of my playing.
As an overarching kind of thing in terms of taking a solo and shaping the development of that solo, this is something that's actually quite difficult, and it depends. You've got to be playing with good players who can actually follow and build with you. But I generally will start out the same way a lot of people start out, playing just a few notes, allowing myself to outline the harmony in very simple ways, very simple melodies, basically allowing myself to build ideas that I can develop. Sometimes you just want to go straight in, all guns blazing. I'll generally start out in a moderate register, not too low, but maybe around the lower end of the guitar, maybe the top 4 strings. And if I'm having a good day, I will try and work further up towards the higher register as I go and play more rhythmically dense material or more rhythmically complex material as I go.
You got to tell a story. It was actually kind of tough in a way. My first band that I toured with a lot was kind of an improvisational thing. We'd open solo sections. And then I had like a steady gig at the 55 bar for a long time. And I would solo until I was done. But, I grew up listening to, my favorite guitar players would be Jeff Beck or David Gilmour, Michael Schenker, these guys who could just build a solo really beautifully well. And then getting more into the jazz thing, kind of like when I first got heavily into it, was way into Mike Stern, who was a master of building tension in a solo, or Robin, or any of these guys that I love, B.B. King. So you have to tell a story. So the roadmap is, it's cliche, but it really works. Like, you're gonna go up. Like, you're starting here and you kind of keep on going and you fill in and you end up at a climax, hopefully, So I think if I feel like I'm as cliche as it sounds, it's telling a story.
Phrasing. I used to approach a lot of solos like, here, let me show you what I know. And I think we all go through that of like, you learn a cool lick or a cool concept and you want to get it in there. And I played some really bad solos from doing that. And it's about phrasing first beyond anything else. And I think that as much as it is listening to guitar players who phrase great, it's so much about singers and how they'll phrase. So it applies for phrasing. It also applies to like vibrato of go listen to some early live Aretha, listen to some Bobby Bland, listen to some Donny Hathaway, like Donny Hathaway doing Jealous Guy. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going to make your phrasing. And when I'm soloing, especially when I'm starting a solo, I'm trying to think like a singer. And the bigger thing is I'm trying to tell a story. So I'm trying to have there be an arc, thinking about where I want to get to for a peak and really putting it together from that side of things.
It's a really kung fu master kind of thing. Is like, respect the people listening to you. That means your bandmates, and that means the audience. The stage is not learning time. It is time to connect and make a statement and use the language that you have. Don't try to play above your means. Don't try to fit in that lick you've been working on for 2 months just because you want to impress somebody or somebody hear it. Like, that's a tough one for me to swallow, because I'll get something under my fingers that I'm really happy to share, and it's like I'm oversharing because it doesn't fit. Like, and that's, old me would tell young me, hey man, you don't have to show everybody everything all the time. Like, just chill and respect the stage. That's the single most important thing when it comes to improvisation, is respecting the people hearing you.
I've been trying to be more intentional about having a blank mind when it comes to phrasing, because, in the past, and this is very common for guitarists, we fall on our stock licks and same old phrases that we use all the time because they're safe. So a lot of times I'll try to take more chances when I'm improvising, try to be more random when it comes to like phrasing and where my fingers go on the neck, as opposed to just going to the muscle memory and what's comfortable. But I mean, obviously, most musicians, when they're improvising, start with stock licks and then take it from there. So a lot of times I'll try to be more intentional as far as coming up with themes and melodies and phrasing and making the solo say something.
The biggest breakthrough I had for improv as a guitar player is associating chord shapes with lines and having scales all over the neck and chords all over the neck and thinking of what the top note of the chord is doing. Like, say I'm improvising something on, I don't know, D Dorian, right? Which is like pretty intermediate, I guess, you know. So you want to think about what the top note is. So I got that, and they all have a number. I number them. So there's the 9, here's the root on top, here's the flat 7th on top, here's the 6th on top, here's the 5th on top, 4th on top, another 9, root, you know, stuff like that. So, and having, being able to start a line from there. That way, every melodic choice you have has a family of notes backing it up in terms of a scale shape and a chord shape. That's the greatest breakthrough I had.
I mean, the best nights are when everybody's more focused on everyone else in the band and not themselves. I mean, this is pretty, people say this a lot, but it's true. And when people start doing that, and when you're really improvising as a group, it usually ends up being that everybody sacrifices some percentage of what they're capable of to raise everybody else up, you know? It's like, if you were trying to move a couch out of your apartment all by yourself, you would have to use every bit of physical strength that you had, right? But if you had 4 people, nobody's really working that hard, and that couch is getting moved a hell of a lot faster. So as an improviser, if we can all do that and sacrifice some percentage of our ability for the greater good, that's when really, really special stuff seems to happen. And then memorable solos, just having like themes, simple ones.
I definitely approach improvisation like someone singing. So I feel like a lot of times if I'm struggling to find a solo or play something, I'll step away from my instrument and listen to it and just sing something. Because I feel like you're so connected to your voice that you are a bit more risky with it and you're a bit more carefree, and you will probably sing way more cool random melodies than you would play them. So I try to connect what I would play on guitar to what I would play to what I would sing, and come up with parts singing and then play them like that. So really try to connect those two parts of my body together and help them kind of co-create a solo.
Do you hear the notes in your mind just before you play them?
No. Maybe that's bad. I don't know. I think I hear the idea that I'm going for. Like I know what I want to hear, and I have a 75%, maybe 65% success rate of playing what I want to hear most times. Now that's in an improvisational sense. If I'm working on recording something or I'm on a session, I have time to like put together a part, then I hear what I want to hear and I can find it on the neck. But I think all of the great improvisers have this thing where they can just hear what they want to hear, know what they want to say. It's like having a conversation. I can formulate a thought in my mind, and then through my use of the English language and grammar and all this stuff, I can just project that thought. I think the greatest improvisers can all do that with music. They can just hear an idea and they can just do it. I'm not that way.
Do I literally hear it like ringing in my head before I play it? No, but I feel like I've developed my ear enough and my understanding of theory and intervals enough to where I know ahead of time what a certain interval is going to sound like against a certain chord. So I kind of use that to inform the melodies and lines and stuff that I create. So kind of yes and no.
I want to say I do, and it's not all the time. Sometimes I will hear a phrase, milliseconds before I play it in my head. A lot of times it's coming from my subconscious or like part muscle memory. Like I know where my fingers can go and it's comfortable, but there's another part of my brain that's being active, like try this, try something else, maybe go over here, maybe go over there. So sometimes I do hear the notes in my head right before I play them, and sometimes I don't, or maybe I'm just not conscious of it. When I'm feeling extremely creative, then I do try to like hear melodies over the chord progression or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like it's really what I think transcribing works well for, and then taking it to the other side of using those phrases is trying to get a very free flow between what's up here and what you can play on the fretboard.
When I'm on, yeah, I think when things are clicking, and that's another thing is like over the course of life and your journey, you're on more than you're not on. Things can take you out of it. Like, is the amp dying? Is somebody spill a beer on your pedal board? Like, things will take you out of being on. But when you're on, hopefully you're singing in your mind. Hopefully you're singing the tune or the improvisation, and that's happening in real time. And that's not something where your hands are driving. They're just executing the melody that's coming from up here. And that's something I really talk about a lot on Patreon. And I scat. I'm a terrible singer, but I can scat when I'm playing. And I'll scat a line before I'll play it. And that moment needs to be almost instantaneous, or you're not really hearing what you're playing. You're just regurgitating the right answer.
I think because I'm so pattern based, I kind of like just look at it and be like, do I want to start on that fret or this fret? Because I know what fret that's going to sound like, and I know what that's going to sound like. So I would definitely say, yeah, I do, because I'm paying attention to the fret. I'm also knowing what note's going to be there. So I do know where I want to start out, and I kind of have like my typical like kind of licks running into the beginning of the solo. So I do hear what I'm going to do right before I do it, for sure.
So this is very much dependent on what's happening, in fact, to a much greater extent than I used to. If I'm playing melodies, I'm usually hearing them around the same time I'm playing them. But I'll be totally honest, they're probably not 100% the same as I heard them. And I've done a lot of functional-based ear training, but I don't have the ability to hear a melody that's relatively complex and just play it back immediately and know exactly what it is. It just isn't the way I play. When I play the stuff that's faster subdivisions and more note dense, what I hear is the very detailed contour of the line. So I'm not hearing every single note, but I know exactly where the contour of the line is going. But if you ask me to sing the line exactly, there's no way I could sing the line.
Sometimes it depends what it is I'm playing. Obviously, if you're playing more fast, I hear the overall sound of what I'm kind of going for. And that comes from practicing, Like, I want to do something, I don't even know. You just play. But the more that you would practice incorporating upper structure triad thing, whatever, I want to put this triad over the top of that. The more you get that in your head, you hear that sound and it becomes part of your vocabulary. Just like I'm not thinking about using a word when I'm speaking to you, because learned a language,
I've been trying to do that for several years now. And sometimes, of course, you don't, or I don't. But that is kind of the idea, is to try to just let something take over that is not intellectual at all. It's just sort of intuitive and by ear.
Yeah, I feel like yes, but if I do, I'm skeptical of it because it means I've probably played it before. So I feel like sort of a sweet spot, but you also don't want to not be deliberate. So kind of a sweet spot is like a lot of times I have like more like the direction of the notes, like the contour of the notes, and like a rhythmic idea, and then the exact specificity of the notes. It's kind of like the first note and the last note are the really important ones, and anything else in between can be anything. Luckily, like if you've done your practice, again, going back to fundamentals, you can say things that are in the right key if you want them to be. But yeah, it's almost like when people are thinking of like melodic ideas or themes and stuff, a lot of times the thing they're actually hearing is rhythmic anyways, or just in the general direction of like notes going up or notes going down. And the actual notes themselves kind of like just do the best you can.
What trick or theory had the most bang for the buck influence on your playing?
Again, man, the triads thing. Like, I keep going back to it, but it is the thing that just opened up the neck for me. It's what allowed me to get out of the open position and move anywhere on the neck and be able to play anywhere I wanted to play.
Okay, this might sound a bit cliched, but I would say understanding how to use minor pentatonics to generate interesting modal sounds. So for instance, using a minor pentatonic a semitone below a major 7 chord to create a Lydian sound. And that's primarily because minor pentatonics fit so beautifully on the guitar and give you so much vocabulary that's so guitaristic and so unique to the instrument, that being able to utilize that vocabulary in different harmonic scenarios without changing the physicality of the lines was very appealing to me. I don't think about it so much these days, but back in the day, that was something that I was absolutely blown away by, if that makes sense, that kind of process.
Well, I would say, especially because I'm a slide player, getting really familiar with my scales and everything on individual strings. So learning the like kind of, the half hold patterns and stuff for all the different scales and modes, and Yeah, I think that just that in addition to the learning the modes, kind of like I talked about before, that helped me be able to visualize the fretboard a lot better for playing slide, especially, but just for all playing.
Triads. Yeah, because everything's built upon that. Triads are just, that's the key to everything. Now, that's not the only thing you need to know to play, but that really helped me put everything together. So I thought I knew them. When I was getting at my point was, I'd learned triad arpeggios and assumed that triads is you were playing arpeggios as opposed to, no, these are the notes in the chord, and then you can play this triad on top of that triad, and it gets you the 9, 11, and 13, and then, oh, that's that sound, and so triads, that would be it. So at the bass level, you can sound like Keith Richards and kill it. You can play R&B tunes and get the guy who gets the phone call. You start learning that Hendrix kind of, Curtis Mayfield stuff. You get more phone calls. It's all triad based. And then suddenly you're thinking, oh, Larry Carlton's just putting this triad over the top of that. And it's all diatonic. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that was it. So it starts at the smallest thing, and then it can lead to the biggest stuff.
In jazz school, you learn like the harmonic minor stuff. See, I don't even know anymore. But that was the aha moment of being like, oh, I'm actually learning how to play jazz, like outside jazz, and resolving it the right way. When I figured that out, then I was like, oh, that's what I've been wanting to learn for so many years. Like, what's the key to sounding kind of outside a little bit? And it's not necessarily just learning that scale and all the related modes and everything, but learning the money notes. What notes and what phrases within that theory make the cool jazz licks. That was a big aha moment years ago.
I like the idea of taking simple things that you know well to get new sounds out of them. Superimposing certain sounds over chords is a great way to do that. So yeah, that's like a relatively simple thing I think that can take you pretty far.
Metronome, using a metronome in the right way. And this very much came of, I always felt like my rhythm and timing was lacking. And this really came out of the record that Josh Smith produced. And Josh has one of the tightest pockets of any guitar player out there. His time feels absurd. And his standards for me, in terms of where my time feel should be on those rhythm parts, was also equally high, and it opened my ears to some of the things that I thought were acceptable that weren't. And it was sitting around and playing like an unaccompanied blues with a metronome, starting off just rhythm, super simple, playing a motif, then going to being able to play the lead without the changes behind you and keeping that pocket. It was a game changer for me. Within like a year of doing that, went from where I thought it was a real liability in my playing to where I didn't feel like it was an issue.
I love the sound of open triads or spread triads, and there's this thing you can do where instead of going up the neck, like say in G major, right? You got a 1 chord, a 2 chord, a 3 chord, 4 chord, a 5 chord, a 6 chord, a 7 chord, 1 chord again. Those sound fine, but if you do it, the inversions of them, but like you're going down the neck but up the scale, I love the sound of that. So you go, here's a 1 chord, so G and then A minor, and then a 3 chord, which would be B minor, and then C major, D major, and then E minor, and then
unlocking that secret of the numeric being under the fingers. Like the walls fell down like Babylon around me because I was only able to play where I knew I could go versus writing the melodies and the things that I've been writing over the past 14 years, 12 years. I feel like Disconcerting Amalgam was like, it was starting to unlock there. And Truth and Lie, it got broader. And by Junktown, it was like, yeah, man. Now it's like I can blend every genre into everything that I'm to be comfortable in my own skin. Like I could be the world's worst guitar player and everybody be like, that guy's awful. But I'd be comfortable being like, yeah, but this is my music. I like it,
Learning that chords are synonyms, you know what I mean? Like that, like G major 7 and B minor 7 are almost exactly the same thing, or like A minor 6 and F sharp minor 7 flat 5 are exactly the same thing. That opened up a big whole world.
So the thing is, like, there's so many things that I like doing that I'm like, I don't know what they're actually called. Different like double stops, like sliding double stop stuff. Basically, like all like the Mateus Asado stuff where he's just like hitting a note and then really sliding and fluidly moving across other ones and then really being selective on which notes I pick out, that has been huge on just making things feel right and making people really happy with it. So for me, just really focusing on finesse and dynamics and like really like I love solos where I'm like really barely touching something and the dynamics peak from like low to high and the emotions really speak out, and just making everything feel as fluid and liquid as possible.
Have you ever experienced any injury, strain, kind of tension due to playing? And how did it change your playing practice? What changes did you make in order to kind of heal?
I have not. I've luckily, and I think it goes back to a lot of good stuff from starting on violin, of really focusing on the kind of physics of how we're setting up on the instrument. I have dealt with nothing that guitar has caused.
Yeah, so no pain. I've never experienced pain with my playing at all, but we talked about this a little bit before we started all these sessions, these questions. I do currently have ulnar nerve compression and another compression, I forget the name of it, thoracic outlet syndrome, that's what it's called, across here. And that's meant that I've lost a decent chunk of control of these two fingers, or strength and dexterity and stamina. And I think if this had happened when I was younger, I'd have found it very, very difficult to deal with. But I'm a lot more stoic about it these days. And I think realistically, you just have to be quite stoic about these things, because your body will tell you when you are doing something wrong. You cannot fight against that. You have to go with it, and you have to just treat it as, this is happening to me. I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to fight against it. I'm going to do all the things I can to make it better, but it is what it is, and I'm going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, I was playing incorrectly like this. You know, I had my hand bent. I just went to a really great chiropractor that my friend Jason Laughlin recommended. I was having numbness in these two fingers and right here, and I came in and he's like, oh, yeah, it's your shoulder and your neck. They call it ART, active release therapy. Where like they kind of dig into this muscle, and then you move the arm, you're like crying, it hurts so much. But then I walked out and I was like, oh my God. So my point of all that is, you know, I'm starting to try to do exercises to avoid it, stretches and things. Because, you know, you sit like this all day, you know, and you see yourself in a mirror, you're like this. If I overdo practicing, like when I got the Yngwie Strat, I got totally back into shredding just for fun. But I knew well enough that I had to be very careful in how I approached it. Because once you do the injury, then you got to lay off. If you just know how you're doing it, okay, I'm going to practice for a little bit, then I got to stop. I know I'm really into it, but I got to stop and then come back.
What aspect of practice do you think that people overlook the most?
Playing with others, because that's what we do when we get out there, right? So we often will play to just a metronome, which is important, or just a backing track, which is kind of like others, but not. So I think we may not be able to do that in our daily practice, but I do think it's good to be part of a band in which the band plays together a lot, or if you don't play in a band, to go out and just play with others and experience. Well, I played to a metronome my whole life. I feel like my timing's really good, but you go play with somebody and their timing is a little loose, and it's not about, well, I'm going to play so disciplined that they sound like garbage. At that point, my goal is, how can I make this sound better? So I've always noticed, like, just playing with other people, even if they're a great musician, the time feel and understanding how to play with one another, going, we're not going to have perfect time. We don't practice the same ways. We don't practice the same things. But I'm not going to play a polyrhythm to purposefully throw them off because I know how to play polyrhythms. I'm going to play to that scenario, make that as best as I can.
I'm going to go back to time here again. I think we see, especially these days, unless you've got a very good teacher who's guiding you through this stuff, it's very easy to get stuck on the kind of social media train of, oh my God, look how flashy everybody is, look how amazing everybody is, whilst forgetting that good time feel will make everything you play sound fantastic. You only have to listen to Mark Lettieri play for 2 seconds to get the idea that it doesn't matter what he's playing, it all sounds amazing because his time is so good. He's tight and his time is like, he can play with the time and do whatever he wants groove-wise with the time. That rhythmic control is more important than any other aspect of your guitar playing, bar none.
I have an answer I feel like is maybe too easy, but I'll just say ear training. Being able to identify intervals and chords and different scales and, you know, and all those types of things just by ear.
Learning the fingerboard, you know, it's the answer to everything, really. I mean, not everything. It's not the answer to being a great improviser, but it makes everything so much easier. And just start up by learning each string at a time. That's all, you know. And it's like there's no rush. Just all right, this week I'm just going to memorize the notes on the high E string. You know, it's not that hard. So I think that's what people most overlook if you're talking about straight on practice. And the other thing I would say is I think no song is too easy to learn. Learn as many songs as you can. I know a ton of rock and blues tunes. So learning a lot of tunes, and then also you learn how to play that way. So whether it's, learning how to play Wish You Were Here or some Nirvana tune, like just learn all the songs you can possibly learn how to play.
Well, because I'm not really an active practicer, I would say that whatever practice time you have, spending it wisely, but also making it productive and effective. So it doesn't really make sense to spend an hour just doing that John Petrucci warm-up that I was talking about, because that's just going to be dull and you're going to hate playing guitar. So figuring out, kind of having a plan before you go into practice would probably be beneficial. But at the same time, sometimes I don't do that. Sometimes my practice session is just me sitting around and noodling, but it's really me trying to be creative and come up with new things and discover, because I'm constantly discovering new ways of playing things or inventing new techniques that maybe someone else hasn't done before. So that I consider a practice session for me. As long as you're being productive, I think that's the most important part.
I don't know if people overlook this, but I know that I did. So maybe other people do too. But I think playing things slow, even if you're trying to play something fast, even if you need to play fast, really slowing it down and necking each note, making sure it's a pure connection can make it much easier to play it fast.
I think people might be overlooking their touch when they practice, because it's not something that's easily quantifiable, like and teachable. But you can tell when someone has amazing touch, right? I think maybe that's an aspect of where classical musicians excel. They do focus on like how to attack, how to make the string bloom, like the difference between free stroke and rest stroke and stuff like that. And like, what I mean? Like so much of what people notice about someone's musicianship is their touch, is their tone. And if you get that right, it's like, man, that is a really good musician. Maybe that's my answer.
Using their ears. Like, are you practicing? Have you recorded yourself? Like, we literally can record ourselves and see what we actually sound like. Not what you sound like when you're playing, when you're focused on executing things. What's your pocket like? Record you trying to play good acoustic guitar, record yourself playing the intro to Lion Eyes. Because everybody thinks they can play it. And there's no pocket. And there's no lushness. Like, and that's simple. Now magnify that to Chick Corea or John McLaughlin or, what is it, Birds of Fire, Mahavishnu. Like, go there with that level of attention to pocket and detail. You gotta listen, man. You gotta listen. That's all there is.
This is going to seem very contradictory because both are right answers to me. Some people don't put in the time doing stuff that's a little boring, and then they don't get to have more fun playing because they don't get that stuff. And then they don't get as far in the video game. They can't have as much fun playing. People who get too into the other thing forget to have fun and just improvise and goof around. Also, and I think this is the biggest answer of all, people forget to sound bad when they practice. Because that's what it's for. That's when you're in the science lab. Pour stuff in beakers and like blow stuff up.
I think in today's world, in like the Instagram, TikTok world and everything, the biggest aspect that people are missing is playing with other people. I think a lot of people build these incredible skills that are, mind-boggling that I wouldn't even try to attempt to do. But I think the biggest thing that's overlooked is just communicating with other musicians, feeling other musicians in a room, being able to like really connect with other musicians. And I think that's because in today's world, it's so easy to just be in a room by yourself and not play with anyone.
For me, it's slowing down and making sure I've got the thing I'm trying to get. Because I'm incredibly impatient, so I will just try and get something. I'll try it a few times, and then once I've barely got it under my fingers, I'm like, cool, I got it, move on. When really, I need to probably spend way more time, like shedding that idea or that thing. So I would say that, and then recording yourself. If you are practicing your instrument, you should have some kind of recorder going and listen back. It's like watching the game film. To use a sports ball analogy, like just you're going to learn so much about what you are good at or what you need to work on.
Do you believe that playing guitar at a high level is more about talent or work ethic?
Work ethic, period. I think that there are people, we've seen them, that just somehow that dude plays my brother just somehow plays everything really well, or anything he touches, videography. Joey Barnes. It's like, who are these people? Aliens. And we've seen UFOs. No, I'm just kidding. So these people, they're obviously talented, but they've also, in a certain sense, not put the work ethic in to really master all of those things. They're just naturally good at all of them. Whereas like this, I was not naturally gifted as. And I don't know about you, but most of the time when people see me play, I will get someone will say, oh man, just God-given talent. And it's like, oh, it's such a sting. Because it's like, you have no idea how much I've begged for that talent and never got it, and I just had to go do it. So to me, to play on a very high level, you can have natural gifted talent and then embellish upon it, or you could have that and then do that for 40 years.
Work ethic, without a doubt. I know no one who's gotten there on talent alone. I mean, do I think that some people take to certain skills quicker? Sure. But that alone is not going to make you a great guitar player. It's any of us who are doing this for a living or doing it at a high level, either one of those two. It's like we sacrificed a lot of doing the normal things as teenagers and kids to sit in our rooms and practice. And there's no way that I've ever seen around that. Like, everyone I know that does this thing is obsessed with it. And somewhat also, I think the one thing that I see a lot, and this is across the board, not just with guitar, but when someone's doing something at a very high level, especially in like artistic or athletic pursuit, some degree of having an obsessive personality over things, of sinking your teeth into it and just not letting up.
It's about connection. It's not about work ethic, because there's been a lot of great players eat up with substance abuse that don't have a work ethic that can go out there and connect. And there's been a lot of great players with not as much talent as other players, and they can go out there and connect. Like Jack White goes out there and connects. He ain't playing Countdown unless he's sitting at home playing Coltrane changes. But no, in all seriousness, the most important thing about playing guitar and or music, it's not even about the guitar. Like, when does a guitar not become a guitar? Like, if it's a tenor guitar, is it not a guitar? If it's a baritone, is it not a guitar anymore? There's grammatical semantics that we can get caught up in. The most important thing you can do is connect with somebody else. The most important thing about playing music is the language. The feeling and the conveying of emotion from one living soul to another.
On a sort of existential level, I believe that everything is luck all the way down. You have almost no control over your genetics. You have a limited amount of control over the amount of practice you do, but you have no control over your will and desire to practice. That's all down to nature and nurture, and you didn't have any control over that at any point in the process. I don't believe in like God-given talent, so on and so forth, but I also am very realistic about the fact that you can't work miracles, but I do just fundamentally just cannot get round the fact that I do unfortunately believe that it's luck all the way down, and you are not in control of most of the things that you think you're in control of. I basically don't believe in free will. I don't believe in any of those things. So again, that might seem like a negative thing, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy the journey and you can't get a huge amount out of it.
I think personally it's more about work ethic and just learning, whatever that means for you, just learning the right things that are going to get you to play the way you want to. I think we're all, certain people are just predisposed to pick things up a little easier, which I guess that may be a way to define talent. But yeah, I think it's more about the work and what you're studying.
Oh, work ethic. All right, yes, there are those people like the Julian Lages of the world who, from a very young age were prodigies. But no matter how talented an individual he is, and clearly is, he practices his ass off to the point where he got vocal dystonia. You know what I mean? Like Robin's whole, full of nonsense. Like, I don't really practice. I'm like, give me a break. He plays all the time. On the couch, unplugged. He's just always playing. And talent, I think, can be overrated in many ways. So there's a talent that can get you someplace quickly, right? I have a talent for the guitar. I've got a physical talent. Like, some people can run faster than other people. So physically, I picked it up easier, let's say. It doesn't mean you can play musically or progress.
I would say more work ethic, just learning in guitar is a process. It's a lifelong process. So if you're passionate about it and you're diligent about practicing and everything, I think that means more than all of the little improvements that you make, you know. I would say, yeah, that's more important more than anything. And kind of focus more on that. Focus more on the journey of learning the guitar as opposed to getting stressed out about like not being able to learn fast enough or nailing these certain techniques just yet. You might not be able to play them ever, but as long as you're enjoying playing guitar with whatever skills you have right now, I think that's what's the most important part.
That's probably changes from person to person. I think, of course, there's going to be a little bit of both. And I think for me, I think I'd probably say work ethic. I think that some people are they just sound great no matter what. You know, I'm always like, man, I wish I could do that, whether I practiced or not. But yeah, I think there's always some sort of combination of those two things.
I think it's equal both. I don't think it's more of either. If you're resting on your talent and you're not working to your full potential, you're not going to get anywhere. And if your work ethic is really good, but you don't have your talent is not as good, you're also not going to get anywhere. I feel like it has to be like both there. So I think talent will get you started quicker, but work ethic will keep you progressing after you're already on your way. You know.
For me, work ethic, because I only had so much natural talent. At a certain point, I wanted to keep going further, and my natural talent wouldn't let me. So I had to just put in work. I think some people just got it. I do think that happens. Yeah, I guess it's really is more than talent or work ethic or anything. Is just intention. So, I mean, we've had nights where like it seemed like nobody in the crowd was into what we were doing, but we were into what we were doing. So maybe, I don't know if something was off there, if we didn't like what we did, but then we would walk off and be like, we did exactly what we meant to do. You know, we held up our end of the bargain. So I don't know what to tell you guys.
It's not about talent. It's like, I don't consider myself a very talented guitar player compared to most people that I know or watch or have played with. I would say I am a mediocre at best guitar player, but I've worked really hard and I know the things that I'm good at and I know where I fit in and I know where I don't fit in. And I'm saying that in the context of like, you know, playing in a band out of Nashville or like producing stuff or writing stuff. Like I know where I fit in, where I'm comfortable and what I'm good at and where I can like add to something. And I know where like, hey, I'm not the guy. I'm just not the guy for this. So I think it's talent for sure. But talent just denotes how hard you have to work to be good at something. And a lot of times, man, the most talented players out there, the most purely talented players don't go that far in the professional context because they didn't really have to work that hard at it. And they didn't really develop that work ethic around the musicianship. And if you're going to make a living as a guitar player today, which unfortunately is, I think, harder to do than ever, you've got to have a super dialed in work ethic.
I think it's both. The playing is obviously a talent, but the work ethic is what's going to keep you on a gig. So people always say, like the playing will open the door, but your ethic and your personality and everything will keep you in the room. So it's very equal parts for sure. You know, in the pop world, you don't need to be a virtuoso player to play these songs, but you need to be a very likable person to want to be taken on the road and to want people to continue to keep you around and to value you. Because I think that's the biggest thing in this industry is making yourself valuable to an artist and to a crew. And I would say it's equal parts both. You can't have one without the other.